Very well. Before continuing to deal with the oral questions, a number of matters were raised with me prior to the adjournment. The first question is the election to members of the election of chairs of the two panels following Deputy Labby's appointment as Minister. And I propose that we deal with that this afternoon, having considered people's representations, and then conclude and then deal with that immediately after questions to ministers without notice. Or did you want to raise something, the Deputy of Greville, before I carry on?
Yes, sir, and it's in regard to what you've just said, actually. I would like to propose that the elections for the chairs take place tomorrow morning. That way they give people the opportunity to consider the positions, and if they are required to write a speech or, you know, it just gives more people more opportunity, I feel. I'd like to make that proposition.
Very well. Well, I think that probably is in order. I did ask before the lunch and adjournment for indications to be sent by email to the greffier, and no indication was sent. The universal voice was that we should be dealing with it this afternoon, and only two individuals indicated, one for each of the respective positions, that they were thinking of standing, and no one suggested it would go to tomorrow, which is why I made the provisional decision that we would continue this afternoon. But I think it is open to the Assembly to regulate its own business to that extent, and it's right, therefore, if you wish to make that proposition, Deputy Greville, that you're able to do so. I must ask firstly, is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir, it is.
Very well. Senator Gorst, you asked to speak.
Sorry, sir, I was simply going to second the Deputy of Greville's proposition. I think she has made the case. It is always better if we can, and I appreciate the two ministers, no one stood against them this morning. I was in a similar position at the start of this term. It is always good for democracy if others can put their names forward, and we can have a debate and vote based on the issues and the programme that those individuals would deliver. So I think the delaying until tomorrow morning is not really a delay at all. It simply allows some who might be wavering and think they haven't given it sufficient thought to give it that thought. We still may end up with non-contested elections. If we delay it until tomorrow, there's more chance that there could be contests, and therefore I second the Deputy's proposal.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Tallier.
Again, here we see a classic example of double standards. So earlier today we had the only reason the position of Housing Minister became available was because we were appointing the current Housing Minister to become the Education Minister, and that by no means what was a certainty. It could have been that a second or third candidate had put themselves forward for that position, and that there might have been members of the Assembly thinking that, well, you know, I might fancy that job if it becomes available, but I need time to think about doing the job of Housing Minister, depending on whether or not Deputy Masson is elected to that position. There was no such suggestion this morning that we should defer the election of Housing Minister overnight till tomorrow to see if somebody else wanted to come out of the woodwork. And clearly what's happening here is that Senator Gorst and his secret party are actually going to try and find out whether they can coerce another states member who up until now would have, you know, let's be frank about this. Everybody in the Assembly should know that these positions were becoming available. Emails were sent over the weekend, and it was quite likely that, well, it was known that if Deputy Labby was elected as the new Housing Minister, then there would be two vacancies coming up, and we know that somebody has put their name forward for that position, And in the normal course of things, they would stand for election this afternoon today, so we can fill those positions. And it sets up an unfortunate hierarchy, if you like, saying that we must fill a position of minister immediately without anybody really having a chance to decide whether they want the same thinking period overnight. But when it comes to a case of a particular candidate who Senator Gorst perhaps doesn't like, that he needs to whip his own party members overnight to put up an opposition to that particular candidate. So let's that's the way I see it, the tactics that are happening here. So by all means, we could have the election tomorrow morning. We could have it actually properly at the next state sitting. So we shouldn't even, I think we either do it now, as we did for the housing minister, or we leave it to the next state sitting so that there can be proper consideration as to what to do. But making up the rules like this as we go along, from the two ministers, Deputy of Grouville and Senator Gorst, I think isn't really becoming of making it up on the hoof, which is what they're doing.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. It's just that I'd like to speak in favour of holding the votes for the chairs tomorrow rather than today, and really notwithstanding Deputy Tadier's comments, to me it seems the only fair way to do it. And I speak from slightly personal experience in that I was this morning considering standing for one of the positions and actually thought, no, I won't, because I don't have time to prepare as I would like to. And to me, that shows without doubt in my mind that there could well be other people in that position as well. So to rush through does seem to me to be essentially disenfranchising people. Just to slightly correct Deputy Tadier's assertion that we only kind of knew about this very quickly, very recently, is that I know the Chief Minister sent an email to States members to confirm his nominations of Deputy Masson. And he said in that email, this is a number of days ago, perhaps 5 or 6 days ago, maybe even a bit more. And in that, he also said he would then be seeking to nominate someone for the housing minister. So we did know a number of days ago that Deputy Masson and somebody else would be nominated as housing minister. And so had someone wanted to stand against either nomination, they definitely did have time to prepare for that, because they knew today we would be undertaking those votes. On the other hand, what we didn't know is whether Deputy Labby would be successful, or indeed that Deputy Masson would be successful. And so we didn't know that their seats on the various committees would be vacant until the successful votes this morning. And it's for that reason that I feel it's only fair that people are given the chance to consider and to prepare if they do wish to stand for one of the vacant positions on PPC or the planning committee. And just as a slight aside, sir, I'd be delighted to know more about Ian Gorst's secret political party. Maybe Senator Gorst can inform States members about that, or indeed Deputy Tadier could inform States members about that, as he does seem to know a lot about it, and I sadly am in the dark. But thank you, sir. I'd definitely be voting to hold the votes tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition to deal with the voting tomorrow? Deputy Truscott.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just want to understand the logistics and ramifications of taking the vote tomorrow. Personally, I'm very aware that there's an awful lot of work backing up for the committee to attend to at the end of the month, and it would be unfortunate if we were to lose that meeting. So I just need to know if tomorrow we could achieve the chair in post, and if tomorrow he could select his committee as well. I think that would be crucial in my thinking, but I'd like your opinion on that, please, sir.
I think the position is that we could certainly list the election for chair for early in the morning, and whoever is selected for chair, if they're in a position to bring their committee together in the afternoon, we could deal with that then. It doesn't seem to be there's anything difficult in standing orders of achieving that.
Thanks.
Very well. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I speak as someone having had a not dissimilar experience a few weeks ago, in that I was vice chair of one panel and the chairman, the former chairman, moved on. That was slightly curious in the sense that the former chair delayed his taking up responsibility of his news position until such time as till a certain time, and that enabled the acting chair, which was at the time myself, to continue. And my concern, sir, is that if we do adopt a situation where we hold it over until the next state sitting, my understanding is, and I stand to be corrected on this, that both committees would fall away, and we will be without guidance in that respect, and that surely cannot be allowed to happen. I did, for the benefit of members, email your good self, sir, over the lunch adjournment to say I will be in favour of the election this afternoon, but I do take note of the proposition made by the Deputy Grubeel as supported by Senator Gorse, and I can see that in the interests of democracy it might appear to be sensible to wait. As Senator Gorse said, it's not really a delay if we wait 24 hours, and I do not. I know Deputy Tableday's point, but I do not for one moment think this is a party issue or giving chance to any other candidate. I think that the sitting vice chairs, as it were, will have they're in a strong position, and I would doubt if anyone else entering the fray would have much chance, but that's a personal view. But I would like to keep the question of party politics out of it, sir. In a sense, I think the Assembly will make a proper judgment according to the ability of the candidates themselves. And for my own part, I will be happy to support the proposition now made by the Deputy of Grubeel. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. So I think the criteria for this decision, for me, is whether or not we are able to appoint the committees in full. Because if we find ourselves without a planning committee, then the volume of business there is going to be seriously problematic. And also, we have to have a PPC that is operational. So if it is true that those committees fall away as a result of them at the present time not having a chair, it seems to me that it's really important that we fill those chairs as soon as possible. Now, I assume that we're going to sit obviously today and tomorrow, but after that we will then have to wait a further chance if for some whatever reason we get the same set of arguments, and I imagine that we're thinking about appointing a number of members. So to me, this leans very much in favour of doing it at the end of this afternoon's session, as we discussed earlier and nobody objected to, and then that gives time overnight for potential members of those committees to be considered, so we can have the complete election and end up tomorrow with a full house, so to speak, sir. So I can see the political arguments, and I don't really like us being in this situation, but frankly, sir, I'm really strongly feeling we should stay where we are and do this at the end of the afternoon. It's still the afternoon for anybody who wants to consider, and anybody who wants to, do email lobbying or so on. That can be done. Thank you, sir.
Sir, you're mute.
Yes, it's my new career as a mime. I'm sorry. It's open. I just wanted to clarify, in case I wasn't clear what I said before. It would be possible to hold election for the chairs tomorrow morning, and if the person elected as chair of any particular committee was prepared to put together their committee over the course of the day, that could be dealt with in the afternoon. So one could have, in theory, a fully constituted committee at the end of tomorrow in both cases. But that does require the elected chair to be able to proceed with that measure of haste. I hope that's of assistance to members. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And it follows on from what you've just said and also what Deputy Young said, that to get committees constituted as quickly as possible is obviously in our interests. And the two candidates who've so far indicated that they would wish to go for the Planning Committee and PPC, in one case it's a vice chair wanting to step up to chair. I'm not sure about the, forgive me, I don't know if the candidate who's indicated their interest in standing is currently vice chair of that committee, but certainly a member of it. So there's incumbency there, and it may well be the case that other incumbents would wish to carry on in their roles. The Assembly is obviously entitled to pick different candidates for those, but if they did turn out to be non-incumbents, then there would need to be a greater period of time to determine who would be on the newly constituted committee if they were seeking to effect some sort of change there. And it would strike me that that sort of discussion would be best held with more time than to do it in between sittings, in between agenda items on one sitting when we'll be debating and trying to listen into other people's speeches. So it does make sense to me to get the initial appointments done by this afternoon and then the membership done tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Now, do you have a point of order, Deputy Tadier?
Thanks. I don't need to ask it anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy St Peter.
So I just feel I ought to declare an interest. I have an outstanding planning application, which obviously has to be heard by the Planning Committee. So obviously it's in my best interest for a committee to be constituted to avoid no further delay. I just felt I ought to share that with you, sir.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? No other member wishes to speak?
Yes, sir, I do.
Deputy Ward.
So just briefly, I wonder whether there is a compromise position on this for sake of practicality, and whether we can just have nomination, if there are nominations by the end of the day for the two chairs, or even for one of them or both of them, then it can be postponed to tomorrow. But if we can get on with one of the panels, if there's no opposition, then that helps the chair of that panel to get their panel together tomorrow, because it's not an easy thing to do, because there isn't a huge number of members who are available for panels, and being a chair of a panel and trying to fill that panel is not always easy, sir. So I just wondered whether there's an opportunity to amend what's proposed here to say, I absolutely agree, if people want to stand, give them some time to the morning, that's absolutely fine. But if they don't, or if it's only one of the two panels, perhaps we can get some of this work out the way early, and move forward. That was all. I would have thought that people would know whether they want to stand by the end of, well, within a few hours or a couple of hours, or from the beginning of today, to be honest, because we knew this was coming up. But I understand some time to prepare a speech if they do decide they want to stand. Thank you, sir. I hope that makes sense.
I think it does, Deputy, but I'm not sure there's a mechanism really for amending a proposition. I think the correct course, if members wish to consider dealing with the matter differently, is to vote against this proposition and then to make a different proposition. This is a procedural matter, and it's a matter for the Assembly to regulate its own procedure. I don't think I can say more than that at this point. You have a point, a procedural question, Deputy Tadier.
Yes, I mean, it might be similar to what you've just said, but so my concern is that if we were to, sorry, it's not I don't want to phrase it in terms of a second speech. It's not, sir. Is tomorrow, if we elect the chairs tomorrow, we don't have to then elect the panels and the committees in full tomorrow, do we, sir?
No, there's no requirement. In fact, it could only really happen if the chairs were ready to bring a list of members before the Assembly.
Okay, sir. I'm wondering if maybe the Deputy Grouville could address that point when she comes back, because I think that might be material about how some members vote.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and ask the Deputy Grouville to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to make a huge speech. It was a simple request I was asking for. I didn't consider a 24-hour and an overnight stopgap for the appointment of these positions to be an unreasonable one, especially as you have indicated, sir, that the appointments of the committee members can be dealt with at the end of this sitting, of this session. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with Deputy Young, who said that we could be that the person interested could be garnering support during this session. I think it needs a clear head and a clear mind, and the candidates may wish to do some research and consider whatever support they might have for the positions. So with that, sir, I make the proposition for a 24-hour delay sitting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Very well, I asked the greffier to post a link into the chat.
So I do have a question before, sorry, it's the
I haven't yet opened the vote. Yes, I haven't yet opened the voting. So what's your question, Deputy Taddy? Is it a point of clarification, or is it
just to make sure we're clear on what we're voting for and what will happen? So the deputy said 24 hours. Is that from now, or?
Well,
no,
Sorry, Deputy. Please say what you think.
I was just going to say it's 24 hours since we appointed 2 ministerial positions, and unlike the deputy was saying earlier that it's one rule for ministers and one rule for others, I don't get that. I mean, the housing minister, the vacancy has been there for a considerable amount of time, weeks even.
I'm not sure that I think the position is, from the point of view of the presiding officer, in any event, that a decision not to take it today must mean we would take it at a convenient time tomorrow. That seems to me that in order to afford any elected chair, the best opportunity of putting together a panel, that the election for chair should happen as the first item of business tomorrow morning. And therefore they would then, whoever the elected chair is, would have the rest of the day, arguably, or at least until business otherwise concluded, to put together the panel and put it before the Assembly if they wish to do so. I would be interpreting the proposition not strictly 24 hours, unless the Deputy of Greville wishes to argue for a strict interpretation of her proposition, and members will then vote accordingly. But my interpretation would be that it be listed as the first item of business in the morning. Do you have any difficulty with that, Deputy of Greville?
No, absolutely not. That's exactly what I meant, because the items for the appointments for the ministers were the first item today, and I just felt the appointments of chairs would be first item tomorrow.
Very well. Well, the voting link is in the chat. A vote pour is to defer the appointment of the chairs of the two vacant chairmanships of the committees until tomorrow morning, first thing. A vote contre is to maintain my original indication that we would deal with it today. Therefore, I ask the greffier to open the voting, and I ask members to vote.
Just double checking, sir. Pour is for tomorrow.
Pour is for tomorrow, yes. Pour is for tomorrow, contre is for today. Abstention means you don't really mind. And one in the link, I see. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted, 33 votes pour, 9 votes contre, 2 abstentions. Therefore, we will deal with the election of the chair of the panels first thing tomorrow morning.
Can we have the 9 and the 2, please, sir?
By all means.
The 9 votes contre were Deputy Masson, Deputy Labby, Deputy of St John, Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Lahegre, Deputy Young, Senator Pallett and Deputy Pershard. And the abstentions were the Constable of Trinity and Deputy of St Peter.
Well, there were another 2 matters on which I was to give consideration over the lunch and adjournment. The first was on the presentation of an urgent oral question in the same terms as question number 1 on the oral questions indicated today. I have allowed that as an urgent oral question, and that will be taken at the end of the oral questions before we move to questions without notice. So in quite shortly, in fact, and that'll be taken by the Solicitor General. The last point was the point that Deputy Ward raised about the ability to challenge questions which had been lodged outside the ordinary time frame for the various for the sittings of the Assembly, given that we sit less frequently now. And in my view, I think helpful guidance has been given to Deputy Ward over the email by the greffier, with which I agree. And in my view, the correct way to challenge questions is to present that challenge to me by email, copied to the Judicial Gref, within 24 hours of the answers being posted on the website. In other words, when the answers are posted outside the normal sitting round, as it were, there's 24 hours from the time they're posted to challenge, and then I will make a ruling as soon as I'm able to do so as to whether they need to be amended. I hope that assists, Deputy Ward.
Yes, sir. Just to say that does assume that we will be notified when they are posted, or they're posted all at the same time, i.e. the set 1 week after the question has been set, because I thought that one of the things about the changes, they may be posted at any time up to the deadline, that's all. And because the website isn't sort of sophisticated enough to give updates in that way, that was all. But perhaps it's a week after. Sorry, sir.
I beg your pardon, Deputy. My understanding is that they are effectively posted en bloc on the Monday after, around about lunchtime on the Monday after the deadline for their provision. Very well. We now come on to concluding the questions with notice, and the remaining 2 questions. Question number 20. The Connétable St Martin will ask for the Minister of the Environment. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. In light of recently submitted development plans, will the Minister publish a list of sites that have been identified as suitable for the growing and production of medicinal cannabis, and explain what additional information was requested in relation to these sites? And will he explain what consideration has been given in relation to these plans to the potential for increased activity and the impact on neighbours and on the countryside? Thank you.
First.
Thank you, sir. I do not have a list of sites which have been identified as suitable for the growing and production of medicinal cannabis, and the reason is that cannabis is an agricultural, growing of cannabis is an agricultural activity, and land or premises that are already in agricultural use will not require planning permission to change from one crop to another. That has been my understanding. So the arrangements for cannabis, the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture controls the process of licensing applications for establishing the business of medicinal cannabis. And I think clearly from the earlier answers today, that is the case. If, however, planning permission is required for any infrastructure or development to support that processing of agricultural produce and indeed cannabis works, of course. This would be considered in relation to the planning policy framework in the Island Plan, where the potential for increased activity and impact on neighbours and the countryside will be among the material considerations. And of course, there are also controls, regulatory controls for under agricultural land controls and licenses for extraction of water and pollution, including impacts of nuisance. All of that regulation would be part of our standard process were any infrastructure or development required. So I'm afraid they do, cannabis is agriculture in a nutshell, sir.
Supplementary, Deputy, at this point?
Yes, please.
Yes,
thank you. I'd just like to state that we're not talking about growing tomatoes or flowers or even hemp. We're talking about growing medicinal cannabis, which is more of a light industry than agriculture. And I'd invite the Environment Minister to come and see what is happening in St Martin and what's being proposed. And on that level, I'd like to say it genuinely concerns me that these licenses are being handed out without due diligence. And why? My question then is why, because it's not agriculture as we know it, it's different. Why have environmental impact surveys at these sites not been carried out?
Right, sir. Obviously, I am quite open to taking advice. I would have to take legal advice on the question of whether or not growing of one crop, because it still is a crop, falls within the description that the Conitable said, that it's become an industrial use. My understanding information that it's not. Now, the rationale for that is, of course, the assumption is that I certainly make is that most of this activity is not going to go on in the open countryside. It will go on in glass houses. But of course, other growing takes place, hypertonic growing of other products and so on. That's traditionally been the case. And obviously, so cannabis being grown in that way within a structure of an agricultural building, from my point of view, has been agriculture. But I will seek that advice. But I do recognise the impact on residents, because certainly I'm aware of considerable complaints and concerns that have arisen in one particular site where very big fences are erected, and I personally do not want to see these proliferate in the countryside. And I think it's an issue which we will have to produce a policy on. And in fact, I've discussed that with the council minister has already, and they've asked me to do so, which I will do that. But at the moment, that's my understanding, and I'll have to come back with a statement on that issue of law, which I think is fundamental.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe that there is a mechanism to ensure that when permission is given and licenses are issued for the growing of cannabis, that there should be a condition for supplying to the local market of medicinal cannabis? And does he also agree that it's ridiculous for medicinal cannabis to be produced in Jersey and exported, but for patients in Jersey to not be able to access that and have to rely on imported expensive products for their medical needs?
Yes, I congratulate the Deputy on his on the creativity of his question. I thought originally he was talking about recreational use, which of course he's not. He's talking about medicinal use. My understanding, and I you know, this is very superficial, that these products would require very, very precise standards. And I understand that's what the ministers who are doing the licensing would establish. And that is likely to require processing to take place and scientific monitoring and so on to ensure compliance. So I think those sort of things suggest to me in practice that being done for a specialist export market seems to be, I can understand why any business would wish to do that. But again, I will, you know, so that's the answer I give to him at the moment, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary, Deputy.
Thanks, sir. And I have raised this issue with the Deputy and the Minister privately and publicly before, but does he agree that the there are far too many derelict glass houses in Jersey that can only be described as a disgrace and disgraceful misuse of agricultural land, and that there should be no presumption whilst he's minister that any change of use should be allowed for these sites, but a good use of the sites could of course be for cultivation of cannabis or other agricultural products.
Thank you, sir. I thought I'd misunderstood the deputy's question. Certainly there has been historically, as long as I can remember, a serious problem with dereliction of countryside sites as a result of greenhouses being allowed to get into a dangerous state of collapse. My expectation of that is because their owners have a hope value, or at least they have a notion that hope value, if they wait long enough, they and their successors may actually eventually get planning permission for homes to be constructed and, as it were, deliver the crown jewels in money terms. That is not a thing while I'm a minister I would seek to encourage, and in fact the policies of the Island Plan will address that, because we do have every glass houses have conditions, not every, most of them have conditions for removal in the event of their disuse, but we know that doesn't happen. But that, because I have to be frank, that doesn't rule out where you've got a site where the site is a good potential housing site. I think that will have to be looked at as part of the Island Plan process. So this is not a one-size-fits-all simple answer to this point, but it is a matter that the Island Plan will have to address.
Deputy Wickenden, Deputy St Martin, Deputy Ward, then the final supplementary. No more questions on this particular one. Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe that there is enough protection from building large security fences in the country zone during the licensing of these sites, and if not, what does the Minister plan to do to strengthen it so we do not see a proliferation of security fences hiding our green island?
I agree that there is an issue there, and I can't give him a comprehensive answer now. Of course, as a member of the Planning Committee, the Deputy will of course have that task to be able to make those decisions. I certainly think at the moment the visual impact and what it does to the character of the area is a matter for a planning decision. Now, whether the policies are strong enough to actually give the planning committee the tools to stop that, I'll have to have a look at. But I think I have also heard, it's not entirely negative, I've heard it suggested in one conversation that it is possible, it should be possible, to put security features within structures and not have to have them in the kind of very unsightly way which is offensive to many people and not in accordance with Jersey's character.
So, supplementary quickly, the planning committee will only address, does the Minister know the planning committee will only address this situation if it comes to them because it's been brought to the committee? These planning applications can be done by delegated authority to planning officers, so if the policy is not strong enough, then it will happen without the planning committee's involvement, and it will be approved. So will the Minister go and look at the policies and make sure that they are strong enough, and that his delegated powers that he gives to the planning officers, they know where they stand?
Thank you. I think this issue of delegation to planning officers is a key one. At the moment, there is a very high level of delegation, and there needs to be in order to keep the planning system going. But I do rely on the protocol that's in place, which was agreed, I believe, between the chairman of the planning committee on this matter. I do have powers to give, as minister, powers to give direction to the chairman of the planning committee. I have chosen not to do so because I have faith in the committee. But if the deputy is suggesting I do that, I'm open to looking at that idea, sir, so that matters all go to the committee of this nature.
Thank you, Sir Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased the Minister mentioned security fencing in the countryside. He also mentioned light pollution, and many of my parishioners are very concerned about the potential for light pollution, not a light that comes from inside the greenhouse, but lights which are outside greenhouses and used for security reasons. I'm not aware of it, but is the Minister aware of any rules or regulations around light pollution, or is it something which is subjective and doesn't actually have any legal definition?
I stand to be corrected, sir. The answer is I don't know definitively, but I do agree with him that light pollution is an issue, full stop, anyway. And I think, but I will undertake to come back to him. But I've absolutely no doubt that these sites are potential issue of light pollution. And at the moment, I'm not aware what can be done about it from a technical point of view, if it's possible to ameliorate that nuisance. But certainly if residents are adversely affected by light pollution, I've had incidents of that, I can tell you now, at Lekenove School with the floodlights in people's homes, keeping people up at night, but not yet of greenhouses. But this is a fast emerging matter, and so I've obviously got some work to do, and I undertake to do that and to keep members posted as progress is made.
Very well, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I actually had a point of clarification that it's really quite important. Can I check with the Minister that he's talking about what type of cultivation of cannabis? Is it via a process of hydroponics, which is an industrial process which doesn't use soil and uses a vast amount of water and is an enclosed greenhouse with controlled lighting? Or is he talking about the type of growing of cannabis as with Jersey hemp, which is a slightly different crop, which is outside in open fields? Because there are two very different processes there. Can I just confirm what type of growing he's talking about here? Thank you.
Yes, most of my answers were in respect of the former. Now, I'm not a technical expert on these, but we have had products grown hypertonically before. So all my answers were in respect to that possibility. My understanding is that the hemp crop grown out into open fields, as it were, wouldn't require licensing because the psychoactive element or the component of it in that particular variety or species doesn't exceed the legal limits. But I do believe that what was referred to as industrial is hypertonic growing of material which exceeds the psychoactive substance levels under controlled conditions, which, as I said, the Minister licensed that I don't. But I will. But the key point is I will have to check legally whether that constitutes an industrial use or whether it's right, the advice I've been given and gone on that it's agriculture. That is as much. I have to get a definitive judgment on that, sir.
Supplementary, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask the Minister, is there going to be an environmental audit of both types of growing? Hydroponic growing does not add the sort of benefit to the soil that outdoor growing of cannabis can. So therefore, the environmental benefits are very different. Also, it is a more industrial process when you take the hydroponic approach, because you are controlling every sort of aspect of the plant's growth very carefully, requires huge amounts of water, and can attract new types of pest, which may be new to the island. So can the Minister assure us that a fuller environmental impact can be made? It may be absolutely fine, but I think it needs to happen. Thank you, sir.
The deputy is raising very good issues. I can deal the question of the water consumption. Yes, there is a regulated matter because such activities have the potential to reduce the water table level from surrounding domestic boreholes that people rely on for drinking water, and obviously that would be a problem. Those impacts would be assessed. In terms of the other issues of pests and diseases, we have a very capable, thankfully, a phytosanitary scheme that team which are monitoring and will deal with those matters, sir. But I think in terms of an audit, then I think these are issues that are going to have to be set down in a policy. And as I said, it would be. I think this has to be included as well as the planning issues. So thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Conrad Samad.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful to the Minister that he said that he'll look forward, that he'll look into having, sorry, I can't read my writing, that he will seek legal advice on this subject about what is industry and what is agriculture. And I just wanted to ask for clarification on exactly who in government is responsible for the awarding of these licenses, because the Minister for Economic Development told me that it was the Minister for Health, and then the Environment Minister in my written answer to my written question 29 and just now has said that it is actually the Minister for Economic Development. So I would really appreciate clarity on who actually does handle these licenses. Thank you.
Well, sir, the brief to me is that the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture has responsibility for that licensing, but I understand, I think I listened to his answers earlier, that this is done under arrangements which our Health Minister agrees, so I'm afraid I can't give a definitive answer, but I can say it is most definitely not myself. The planning and the other environmental issues do come under the Environment Minister.
Thank you.
Senator Farnham, you've asked to speak. I'm afraid I can't permit that because this is question time. And so that final question, Deputy Morell will ask the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you. Actually, sir, it's the Minister for Social Security.
I beg your pardon.
Thank
yes,
you. Originally, I did address it to Health and Social Services Minister, but I was directed elsewhere. So thank you, sir. Will the Minister explain what role, if any, the government has in regulating the cost of private care for the elderly, whether in the person's home or in a residential home? And furthermore, will she inform members how the government ensures that any increase in long-term care payments is not taken by the care sector as a signal to increase their charges?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Long-term care is for all adults over the age of 18 who require care, not just for the elderly. The government does not regulate the cost of private care. Care homes are private businesses who set their own fees. Social care for adults in Jersey is provided by the Health and Community Services Department, some parishes, commercial companies and also charities. The government does not control the cost of fees charged for social care. Social care providers are regulated by the Jersey Care Commission, which requires a scale of fees to be published. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary, Deputy.
Thank you. Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes.
I take it from the answer that as well as the government not regulating the cost of care, the Care Commissioner also does not regulate the cost of care, only requiring a scale of fees to be published. Would the Minister explain how then islanders are protected from care providers overcharging or charging unreasonable sums for their care?
I'll try to answer that question. At the moment, we know that the highest fee, which is the $1,094.52, we can still find places for people in the care section. The question actually asked is, do we interfere? Should we are not that the long-term care payments are not taken by the care sector as a signal to increase their charges? I actually understand, I think, where the deputy is coming from, where I take the first question from the deputy today. And if the deputy wants to sit down with me, you know, if our economic model is wrong, I'd love his input as the Assistant Minister of Economic Development. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to ask the Minister, have you not just demonstrated that what we have is a free market free-for-all in the provision of care for our elderly community and for perhaps any of us who may find ourselves in that situation, that is creating real hardship and people having to put vast amounts of money in? And it's not time that there is some regulation of these costs urgently, actually. Thank you, sir.
That would be true, sir, if the deputy's statement was completely correct, that there is not care places out there that people can afford under the prices that, or the amounts of money they can get on long-term care. I'm not saying I'm being complacent. I can absolutely look into this, and I've just given an undertaking to Deputy Morell, who, as I say, I think if we need to look at the economic model, and there is more we need to regulate. But again, these are private companies. and most private companies, for services that they provide, are allowed to charge the going rate.
That brings the time available to questions. I'm afraid that brings the time available for questions with notice to an end. We now conclude questions with notice. As indicated earlier, I'm proposing to deal with the urgent oral question now and allow 10 minutes for that. And then we can move on to questions to ministers in the normal way. Very well. Deputy Gardner, would you like to ask your urgent oral question?
Thank you, sir, and thank you, sir, for addressing it so quickly. Will Solicitor General advise whether there is any potential legal threat to the Overdale Hospital project from the two avenues of legal action under the compulsory purchase of land procedure Jersey Law 1961 and the Human Rights Jersey Law 2000 outlined in Blakely Law's letter of 31st of January 2021?
So forgive me, there's always a risk to public capital projects such as this one from possible legal challenges, especially where a challenge is intimated in a letter from a lawyer such as this. Legal challenges to such projects are something of an occupational hazard for decision makers. How real the threat may be in any given case depends entirely on the merits and the detailed nature of whatever challenge is brought. At the moment, there is no challenge, only an intimation possibly of one in the broadest and frankly vaguest terms, such that it's impossible for me, and indeed any lawyer I would think, to give any meaningful assessment of its merits and consequently the risk that it might pose. I mean, I can deal in very general terms with the two possible avenues that are mentioned in the advocate's letter. It is right that there is a very arcane procedure which allows a petition of Her Majesty in Council. In this instance, it suggested to persuade Her Majesty through the Privy Council, presumably, not to grant royal assent to any special law for the purposes of compulsory purchase. As I understand it, that's very much an avenue of last resort, which means that all domestic remedies should have been properly exhausted before that could be pursued. I myself have no experience of it, and I don't know any lawyer who has. The other general suggestion is of an action under Article 7 of the Human Rights Law that enables a challenge to be made to the states as the Assembly as decision maker, where the decision engages, in this case, it would be Article 1, Protocol 1 of the Convention, which is the right to quiet possession or enjoyment of possessions, and any compulsory purchase of land would engage that right. The question remains as to precisely what, if any, of the detail of such an application might be. It's only broadly hinted at in the letter that I've seen, and it contains the usual sorts of bases one might expect to see in this area, which is, well, the decision makers did not have regard to all relevant factors, or they may have had regard to irrelevant factors in coming to their decision. But as I say, any lawyer would want to see the detail of such a challenge before advising on it. The other point I'd make, forgive me, I'm getting feedback, but the other point I'd make, and really this would be advice I think that any lawyer would want to give, which is that an Article 7 human rights challenge would appear possibly to lie against the Assembly, which would mean effectively all members as decision makers, collectively as the Assembly, could conceivably be parties to such a challenge. any party to litigation is entitled to receive confidential and privileged legal advice. Any lawyer would be sensible to say that giving that advice in a public forum would be wholly unwise and not to be recommended. That I accept is a slightly broad overview, but I fear it's the best I can do in the circumstances.
Thank you very much, Mr. I beg your pardon. Well, yes. I'll now open it to questions. Yes, a supplementary question, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. And thank you for Solicitor General for his answer. I would like to follow up on one of the points. There was a claim that when a compulsory purchase order is made, the States Assembly has to draw up a specific law for each property. The process means that government has to give due consideration to whether or buying or not buying property is absolutely necessary. Can Solicitor General confirm is the decision that we had proposition allowed compulsory purchase to all properties together, or it should be decision per each property?
I don't think the law descends to that particularity. The special law that the deputy is talking about, it would be an enabling legislation which would have to ultimately receive royal assent, enabling the purchase, to my mind at least, of whatever properties were included in that law. So I don't think it's a case of one law per property, but a case of one law for all. That is not to say that the decision in respect of each individual property should not be made in a process that is rational and arrives at a decision that's lawful and rational and procedurally proper. That's a slightly different consideration.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. Yes, it is a question for the SG. Can he point out to a distinction between a decision of the states and a lawsuit objecting to the decision of the states, which I don't believe they can, but the SG can confirm whether that is the case, and a decision taken by a minister?
So I'm sorry, I missed the middle of the first question because the sound cut out. I wonder if I could ask the deputy to repeat it.
Yes, I believe the advocate concerned was complaining about a decision taken by the states. Now, if it's a decision taken by the states, does any advocate have a legal means of challenging a state's decision? I know that they can challenge the decision of ministers, but can they challenge a decision of the states?
So that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Can I repeat the advice I gave a moment earlier, which is that any party to litigation would probably be well advised to seek legal advice which was given confidentially and under the protection of legal privilege. I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm simply trying, I hope, to give advice that is wise in all the circumstances.
Thank you, sir. I'll leave it for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fun.
Thank you, sir. My understanding is the letter indicates that there could be a challenge under the Human Rights Convention, Article 1, Protocol 1, and notwithstanding the SG's comments in relation to the rights to enjoyment of land or property, can he provide some or shed some light on what would be an appropriate acquisition of land or property by the public without being in breach of Article 1, Protocol 1? For example, is there a public interest test or something that would would come into play?
Yes, the Article 1 right is not absolute. It provides that every natural or legal person is entitled to the peaceful enjoyment of his possessions. No one shall be deprived of his possessions except in the public interest and subject to the conditions provided for by law and by the general principles of international law. I don't think we're in international law necessarily here, but it goes on to say The preceding provisions shall not, however, in any way impair the right of a state to enforce such laws as it deems necessary to control the use of property in accordance with general interest. So there are avenues there for under which a lawyer could argue that any particular proposal for the use of property fell within a lawful derogation from Article 1, Protocol 1, the right that is there enshrined.
That is helpful, thank you, sir.
Senator Ferguson, you've something has suddenly appeared under your name. I can't read it. It appears to be a black square dot. But is that an indication you'd like to ask a question of the Solicitor General or something else?
Not this at the moment, sir. I think it's one of these sort of technical aberrations that one comes across.
Very well. Then no other questions. Final supplementary question to Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. My question, can the Solicitor General clarify what potential delay, if he knows, the Westminster residents' legal challenge might bring to the project if they decide to pursue this avenue?
I fear only in the broadest terms, assuming any challenge were brought. Then whatever the outcome at first instance, that is to say in the Royal Court, there may be an appeal thereafter. It is not obvious necessarily how far an appeal process might go, and it's not necessarily obvious in any case, never mind this case, how much or how long a timetable would be to reach an end of legal proceedings. All I can say, I suspect, and probably it's not a matter for me, but where a legal challenge engages a point of very important, or rather of general public importance, then one would think that the judicial greffier would be keen to ensure that the legal process was expedited, so that there was not undue delay in the giving effect to any public policy decision. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solicitor. Colin Harbison, one, you've indicated a desire to speak. I don't really understand. Are you asking a question of the chair? Is it a point of order? Is it something else? Was the question for the Solicitor General has now closed?
Yes, no. So just very briefly, thanks to the Solicitor General for the clarity of his answers.
Well, that's very helpful, Colin Harbison, but there is no locus, if I could use that expression. There's no place for such a statement. By speaking in the Assembly, this is simply the end of question time. Thank you very much indeed. We now come on to questions without notice, in respect to which is a total of 45 minutes, 15 minutes for each. The first period of question is for the Minister of Education. A number of members have already indicated a desire to ask a question, the first of which is Senator Messick.
Thank you, sir. And the previous Education Minister announced an extension to nursery hours provided through the NEF. Can I ask the Minister what his plans are for implementing that, and what members can expect to see come from him and his department in the coming months?
Yes, thank you, sir. And Deputy Doublé raised this question during my nomination. Senator Vowell indeed announced her intention to reach a level of 30 hours consulting and working with industry. So there are caveats in there. I want to produce the early years report and look at it holistically. So as I said to Deputy Doublé at the time, I haven't ditched the intention, but it does require consultation with industry, as well as any changes that might need to happen to the Nursery Education Fund that may need to come back to the states for approval.
Supplementary, please. It was an important moment when the previous Education Minister made that announcement, and many families with particularly young children will be looking forward to that. Could he reassure those people that the plans to expand it are not at risk, and whilst there might be some fine detail to work out, that the support we'll be providing families with very young children will be increased in the coming months and years?
Thank you, sir. I can only reiterate, there are the usual processes which will need to be gone through. as normal policy development work occurs. We do need to work with the private sector on this. There are commercial interests which need to be worked through. There are the other political processes that need to be worked through as well. So, as I say, but the whole package needs to be looked at.
Well, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister, given that the gap in spending between fee and non-paying schools is currently £15,000 across a school career per child, what does the Minister intend to do regards this inequality, or does he feel it is justified? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. As indicated when I stood for election, there is a recommendation in the Independent School Funding Review to consider this matter. It says changing the relationship between the government Jersey and fee-paying schools, including offering greater autonomy and potentially mean tested support fees rather than offering subsidised fees paying education as universal benefit. And as I said during my election, that is something I would want to take to the council ministers for political sounding, because there's no point wasting a lot of political time on it if it's just going to go nowhere.
So with respect, that hasn't answered the question regards the current inequality of £15,000 for a child across their school career. Is the Minister intending to increase the funding for non-fee paying schools so there's equity of spending on all of our children and thus putting all of our children first? Thank you, sir.
And as I said when I stood for the position of Education Minister, I said that in the government plan there is increased funding towards our schools. There is the pupil premium money going in. There is also the money for children with lower prior attainment, which is also going in. So will we reach exactly the same point in parity? Probably not, but is funding going into the children that need it the most through the government plan? Yes, there is.
So you're justifying the inequality. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Moran.
Thank you, sir. I was wondering if I could ask the Education Minister, over the last 3 years, we've seen more disruption to our children's education than certainly any time in my lifetime, possibly even stretching back as far as the occupation, with teacher strikes and COVID taking children out of school for weeks over the past 3 years, months in fact. Would the Minister please advise the Assembly on what steps he will take to try and ensure that Jersey's children do not see another period of such disruption to their education?
Thank the Deputy for his question. The department has already initiated a recovery programme to provide extra tuition to students who may need it. This is, of course, something which will continue to be reviewed. And of course, the other aspects of, more importantly, are to do with the well-being of students, which again, funding in the government plan is there.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes, indeed.
With respect, that wasn't an answer to my question. I asked what the Minister would do to prevent disruption in the first place, not what he will do after the disruption has taken place. So I ask again, what will the Minister do to prevent disruption in the coming years?
I beg your pardon, I got the wrong end of the stick in that question. Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, controls of the pandemic are out of my hands. Of course, we have brought in many safety measures in order to support students. As for what might happen in the wider society, you know, it's a bit out of my hands. What I do know is that the department operationally do have a good working relationship with the teaching unions, but you know, can I prevent disruption going forward? I'm afraid that may be something the deputy is asking, which I may not be able to do.
Well, Deputy Dublin.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister recall the press release from the 11th of December last year, which told parents that children would be given the 30 hours NEF funding. And within that, there was certainty from the previous Education Minister that this would be delivered. And during the government plan debate, there was funding specifically allocated for this, and this was confirmed within that debate. If the Minister recalls all of this, and he's now saying that he's not certain about that 30 hours funding, can he please tell the Assembly what has changed since the 11th of December and since the previous Minister's post? Is it his will to bring in this 30 hours, or is there another barrier that has occurred in that intervening time?
Yes, thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for a question. I have the press release in front of me, and it clearly states that the Education Minister intends to extend the 20 hours to 30 hours, but then also goes on to say that the Minister will have to work with the JEA, the Jersey Early Years Association, and other individuals in order to achieve that. That means there are always going to be consultation and political processes as part of that motion. So it's in the press release as well.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes, Deputy.
So can the Minister confirm that it is his will to have the 30 hours funding, and that also can he confirm that he is planning to have the meeting that was referred to in the press release with the JEA representatives?
Thank you, sir. It is the Minister's will to look at the Early Years Policy Development Board holistically, which will include looking at 30-hour intention, but also working with JEA and other providers as appropriate. And yes, I intend to have those meetings.
Well, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether the uptake of the lateral flow testing provided to schools has proved successful?
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for his question. We have, and I think I've just approved a question, a media query to go out today, which we've had since they were introduced, about 2,500 lateral flow tests that have been conducted with staff and years 11 and above, and all of them have gone out. The vast majority have come back negative. There have been a handful that have been inconclusive. When they have been inconclusive, students have been asked to retake the lateral, or staff have been asked to retake the lateral flow test. We had, I believe, one, where we're now, yesterday, or the day before, or Friday, which came back as positive. The policy then was to follow the PCR test. That PCR test has now been administered and has come back negative.
Thank you.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you. In terms of educational outcomes in general and on balance, is it the assessment of the Minister that the 14+ transfer system in Jersey as it currently stands does more harm than good, or more good than harm?
Thank you, sir. In and of itself, because Jersey has so many different things, we have a highly selective system, you know, up to 50% by the time you're taking the fee-taking colleges, and then you have the 14+ transfer, which as a whole can be argued by some that the creaming of the broth of all those students does lead to, for example, things like lack of social integration, those types of things, which is negative. On the other hand, some will argue that that allows for academic excellence to proceed, as it allows students at the same level to progress. So the answer to the Deputy is there isn't a clear-cut answer.
So supplementary, I know what some argue one way and I know what some argue the other, but I'm asking for an assessment of the status quo from the Education Minister, from somebody who's been working at education as an assistant minister for the past few couple of years, and who's a consummate politician. What's his assessment of whether the 14+ does more harm than good? He must have some experience and some knowledge of the issue, and to know whether to address any issues that arise from that.
Thank you, sir. I have not had the opportunity to conduct a proper analysis as the Deputy has asked.
Well, Deputy Gardner. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Can Minister confirm if his will to have 30 hours funding, or he's going back on that commitment for the nurseries?
Thank you, sir. I don't want to extinguish the intention, which I think the Deputy is talking about, but I want to look at the holistic early years policy report, early years policy board to be produced, to look at those recommendations, bring them to consultation with appropriate stakeholders, and to see what is practical. Because I would highlight to members of the Assembly, when the UK introduced this policy, it actually led to a closure of many nurseries and less choice to parents. So the thing needs to be done in consultation with private sector providers, etc.
Supplementary, sir?
Yes, supplementary.
Thank you. As much as I'm aware, but maybe I'm wrong, that the Minister is himself on the policy board. So if I understood correct his answer, he's saying that he's not confident that he can achieve it. Because the recommendation was that it will be 30 hours from the previous, from my previous knowledge.
Yes, I can confirm I was on the Early Years Policy Development Board, but there are caveats. It's not just the 30 hours, it's what you do with the nursery education fund rate, etc., how that works with industry. So simply having the policy of we'll move to 30 hours without actually properly consulting on any of the implications of that, still needs to be done, in my view.
Second question, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister, does he believe that the provision of a healthy free school meal for all children at school will be beneficial to their health and their well-being? And if so, what measures will he take to ensure this happens? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Ward and the Assembly will know my views on these matters, which is no one wants to see any of our children go hungry in the islands. That I do think that in the first instance, it is parents' responsibility to provide that. Where they are unable or unwilling to do so, it is appropriate for the state to step in. As the Deputy will know, we have a pilot programme being conducted at the moment to best understand how it is best to deliver and where there is demand in the island for such services. And of course, I will design any policy following the results of that pilot programme. Because as the Deputy, I think, pointed out in the debate, he said something like, I believe it was something like 46% uptake, which means that there's still a significant number of children not benefiting from that. And we need to think it's a wider issue. There are other things we might need to do.
Well, that brings the time. Sir? I'm sorry, Deputy, that brings the time available for...
It hasn't answered a single question, but sorry.
To an end. And we now have questions for the Minister of the Environment. First to pose a question, Connie Tarbison-Hellyer.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister for the Environment recall his predecessor, the former Senator Freddie Cohen, promising the states at the time of the Esplanade Quarter Master Plan that the development of the Esplanade Quarter would yield between 50 and 70 million pounds for urban regeneration projects? And if he does recall it, could he advise the Assembly how we are getting on in receiving that money for regeneration?
Thank you, sir. Challenging question. I'm pretty certain that I wasn't a states member at the time of Senator Cohen being minister. I was working for a law firm, and so I kept an ear out, if you like, for what was going on. But the senator did bring forward a piece of supplementary planning guidance for the waterfront area, which I believe was very likely strongly related, if not based on, a scheme from a private developer and then adopted that as supplementary planning guidance. And then I did, but I mean, I certainly heard public comments, but I couldn't give any credibility to the figures that were being quoted. I recall it was discussed. Of course, that supplementary guidance is now completely gone. Two planning inquiries reported that it was completely out of date and had no place. And obviously the Southwest Development Framework now replaces it, which I myself issued, I can't remember when, but certainly within the last 12 months, I think.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes.
I'm sure the Minister will agree with me that the supplementary guidance may have gone, but the promise made to the states must remain. And bearing in mind his comments earlier to my other question on the political governance and oversight of regeneration, and the fact that he is not himself on the regeneration steering group, does he think there is a case for the states setting up an urban renewal and regeneration committee that can get hold of these funds that have been promised and start to do some joined up projects in town?
Well, sir, I'm very keen on joined up work with committees. I find it is not anywhere near as easy as the Constables know to achieve the degree of coordination and integration of policy under our ministerial system. That may seem strange because that was always intended that would be, but I think committees can work well. And of course, I've certainly found as the Environment and Planning Minister not being party to the decision-making processes of the Regeneration Steering Group a problem. Now, whatever you call it, I think, as I said in my earlier answer this morning, there is definitely a role of setting up such a body. Of course, can I do that unilaterally? No, I can't. It does need, I think, the Chief Minister and my colleagues and the Council of Minister to come up with a plan. But I have to say that urban renewal team that was put together in those days, I think it was the 90s, 2 decades ago, was, I believe, extremely successful and brought forward many great progress that benefited private residents and people's homes with what we used to call EPIAs, or environmental improvement areas in town. I hope some of the principles of that will be embodied in the draft island plan, but there is a need for that coordinating function. Yes, sir.
Senator Mesic.
Thank you, sir. Could the Environment Minister tell us if he remains committed to introducing a licensing regime for landlords to ensure that properties which don't meet minimum legal standards are prevented from being let out until they're made safe and habitable?
Okay, so, well, I'm absolutely committed to doing that regulation work because what I found during the COVID lockdown and certainly the last 12 months, that the number of complaints about housing issues, obviously as people are in their homes for much longer time than previously, has dramatically increased. And of course the resources of the team that I have in place, as I've reported to scrutiny, have been seriously reduced, and we've lost key members of staff. But nonetheless, those are the problems. What I'm not prepared to do is to bring forward another set of regulations and have a repeat of what happened before, where I found myself in the situation where I didn't have the support of my ministerial colleagues in bringing that legislation. So at the moment, I'm aware that a number of members have got ideas, and I'm said that I'm quite open to discuss it with those ideas. One under consideration at the moment is we might make such an arrangement, probably a 3-year process. I don't know, but I do think, I must admit, I think we've got the law there. It would be easy to bring it back, but I need a consensus politically in order to do so. And what I don't want to do is to be diverted away from the other big projects, which is carbon neutral and the island plan, sir.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes, Senator.
And following on from the point that the Minister made about support from his ministerial colleagues or lack of it, could the Minister indicate why he doesn't have the support of his ministerial colleagues for this. What have they told him is the issue there? And will he tell us what he's doing to overcome that so that they will support this fundamental measure to improve life for often some of the most vulnerable people in our community?
Well, I think what I tried to do when I brought that forward was to respond to the points being made, that it was what was being suggested, that there was a lot of bureaucracy, it was costly, and it was complicated. But of course, I stripped all those out in the changes that I brought forward, and it wasn't approved. So obviously, and then people basically preferred to have a grand plan of licensing as far as all properties in the island are concerned, and I think that's where the two extent states decisions, that states persuaded themselves. Can I change people's minds? I think the case for regulating and implementing housing standards, which in rented dwellings, is as strong as it was, if not more so, sir.
Well, Deputy Ward. Deputy Ward.
Yeah, sorry, sir. Thank you, sir. I was just picking my question up. So can I ask the Environment Minister, in the JUP on the 2nd of February, an officer in his department was quoted as saying that current policy position for carbon neutrality is to 2050. P27, as adopted by the states, says that Jersey should aim to be carbon neutral by 2030. Was his policy officer misquoted? If not, which is it, 2030 or 2050? Thank you, sir.
Yes, I don't recall reading this press article, but I don't always agree every word that gets written in the press. I think, the reality has been, my understanding of the position is this, is that the state set a goal, an aim, if you like, a process in train to try and see if the island could have a plan to produce become carbon neutral by 2030. That is what the brief I'm working on. Whether that, I stand to be corrected, but my understanding of the technicalities of that is whether or not that is actually a binding commitment, I think, and whether it's achievable, I think is going to be of the function of the plan that comes forward this year, at the end of this year, after the Citizens' Assembly. But if the Deputy wants, I will have to go back and check back that source, that press statement. But in any event, Deputy Pershard is leading on this now, and I don't think under the questions I'm allowed to pass things to her. But I think we are where we are with the state's decision, and there should be no backtracking on that state's decision.
A supplementary, sir?
Yes, certainly.
Is it not therefore very important that we are consistent with our aims and our goals, regardless of how challenging they are? And therefore, that to have officers in his department talk about a goal which is 20 years further, it should be something that significantly is wrong and should be addressed urgently. If we don't set the target, it will never happen, sir.
Well, I think I'm pleased the Deputy used the phrase target, because I think that's what was adopted. Is it a binding commitment? I personally, having been a civil servant myself, it never is an answer to go and directly challenge civil servants over the things. But it does happen from time to time that misreporting goes on. My understanding about the 2050 is this was the goal set by the United Kingdom, I believe, and not by Jersey. Jersey set itself the aim of 2030, but we all agreed that we would have this plan, produce this plan of how we got there, and that is the work that Deputy Jess Pershard is leading on, and there will be lots and lots of opportunities for us to debate this year.
Deputy Ayin.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister be carrying out an environment impact assessment on the West Mount Road development?
Well, this is a difficult one, sir, because I've declared an interest in every single meeting that's taken place, either the states or the Council of Ministers, on the applications for both the hospital and the enabling works. I have made it plain that in my supplementary guidance that I issued, I undertook that there will be a planning inquiry into the hospital application when it comes forward. I have made it clear that I expect that the road and the access will be part of that application, because I do not consider it is acceptable to have separate applications coming forward and put the inspector in a position of having to judge one without the other. The two go together. Part and parcel of that will be the impact, and the factors that to be taken into account the impact were set out in the supplementary planning guidance I issued and in Island Plan. But I think that's the best answer I can give the Deputy at the present time.
Supplementary, please.
Yes, Deputy.
Is the Minister aware of any habitats that may be lost, if any, by the road widening proposal?
I'm not personally aware of the wildlife habitats, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some, because obviously we've got a woodland area in there and surrounding. An environmental impact would always work the same way, is that there would need to be a baseline assessment of what is there before the development, and an assessment of identifying what's there and what the impact is and what is possible to be mitigated or not in any development.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Sadly, Jersey's seawaters are not as clean as many islanders and many states members would like to believe. And as we've seen recently, oyster fishermen who have their oysters classified as grade B by the EU are struggling now to export them into France. Would the Minister please explain what the main sources of pollution are that are stopping Jersey's oysters being classed as grade A, and what measures he is taking to try to ensure that pollution into the sea is reduced?
Thanks, sir. It was my understanding that we do have a couple of grade A oyster beds. If that's not the case, I'll need to check back. But the Deputy, I'm sure, will be aware, because he's obviously very well informed, that the environmental health team undertake monitoring of seawaters periodically, in accordance which is required on a strict timetable tied in with the fisheries. And of course that information has to be presented, and of course if there are exceedances in the level of E. coli, for example, in the seawater, then that could potentially has potential to downgrade those beds. And that has been an ongoing issue. The generals, if there is a problem, I think that the published record has shown in the past that it has resulted in overflows from our STW system, which is where we have a problem with excess surface water, which, as it were, overloads our system, and we get an outflow on a high tide, which then gets carried forward towards the east and maybe picked up. But of course, depends, but of course then those oysters would then need purging if they're to be removed. But of course, at the moment, the difficulties, I don't believe, are the key difficulties at the moment with the oyster fishing is the issues, the situation with Brexit, which is constantly changing at the moment.
Well, that brings the time available for questions to the Minister for Environment to an end, and the next question period for the Chief Minister, Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Is the Chief Minister aware that part of the table of statistics for COVID cases should add both horizontally and vertically, and doesn't? Could he get the IT department to examine the coding and report back to the states? And if he wishes to tell me who to contact, I would be delighted to, but it's almost impossible to see, who to actually address this to.
Yes.
But I've had a number of complaints about the statistics not adding up correctly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister.
Obviously slightly, when I say concerned to hear that, sir, if the Centre could forward me an extract of the table she's talking about, ideally circled with a bit she thinks doesn't cross cast, I'll be very happy to forward it through. I'm sure it's just probably a formulaic error if there is one, or if not, hopefully be very easy to clarify, and we'll get that sorted out as soon as possible. But no, please send it through to me and we'll look at it straight away.
Very well, Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. Oh, hang on.
Sorry, I said could I get a supplementary in? Sorry.
I'm afraid, Senator, I didn't hear you say supplementary. But yes, by all means, ask a supplementary question.
Yes, would the Chief Minister please find what the actual coding is, and perhaps letting some of the experts outside the industry, or at least outside the state's setup, review the actual coding and see where the error is. Thank you, sir.
So I'll find out. Let's find out what the error is first, sir, and then we'll go from there. Once I've got the details of that error, I'll make sure that the Centre is kept fully up to date, sir. And that's not a problem.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. So as alluded to earlier, my thanks to Chief Minister for taking this question. In light of the reports last week, there was an increase in the rise of referrals of young people seeking support for their mental health. Will the Chief Minister update members on the government's response to this increase and advise what further action, if any, will be taken to address the situation going forward, especially because of the effects of the pandemic? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's going to be, I'll try and get this answer although it's long, sir, as concise as I can. So, sir, a review and redesign of CAMS by such department started at the end of 2019. Obviously, that was impacted by the pandemic, but there's still been work continued about prioritising areas for development. And that's resulted in government plan funding to cover the following. For example, sir, early intervention mental health service, which is focused on what's called an IAPT model, improved specialist CAMS service, community-based intensive support service, which is about working more flexibly, including out of hours, and improved quality and performance management systems. Now, sir, as the deputies correctly said, the mental health the mental health impact and requirements have definitely increased as a result of the pandemic, sir. And to mitigate this, extra funding for wellbeing recovery was sought in 2021. This has been used as following, sir, and these are projects that have started and then some that are planned for. So started, 4 extra staff have been put in post who have been working flexibly, including being able to support clients on Robin Ward and working some weekends and evenings. That commenced on the 1st of November last year. We've commissioned a pilot with Kooth online counselling and support for young people aged 13 to 25. To date, over 275 young people have registered on the service, and that pilot commenced in December of last year and will go through to the end of this year. Working in collaboration with Mind Jersey to better support young people on the CAMS waiting list. That pilot commenced about a week ago on the 1st of February, sir, and delivering a primary school arts project, which is about allowing primary school children to express their story of lockdown during COVID. That's about supporting low-level anxiety from lockdown, commenced in October 2020, going through to the end of this academic year in 2021. Looking ahead, sir, planned is deliver training to 30 multi-agency professionals to enable a Who's in Charge child-to-parent violence course to be set up on Ireland. The first parent and carer training session will commence at the end of Q1 this year. We're recruiting a CAMS practitioner to Children and Families Hub. That's about flexibility, sir, to be able to run a CAMS helpline for parent carers and professionals from 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. That will start in April of this year, and also funding individual specialist treatment, sir. In addition, work is underway with HCS to develop a further joint business case. And finally, sir, a children and young people's emotional wellbeing and mental health strategy will be launched over the next few months to provide the strategic direction for this work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and I'll be using my photographic memory to soak all that information up. But what I didn't hear so much, sir, was the communication inside. So I asked the Chief Minister, will he review doing a press conference or engagement specifically for young people, using Dr. Muscat and others out there who could help communicate to our youngsters of what advice and what support is out there with what they're going through? Thank you, sir.
Yes, I've got no objection to that at all, and be very happy again to work with the relevant people, and particularly in discussions with Deputy Plan to see how that can be managed, sir. I would say, sir, there is some communication that's less around mental health, but more about youngsters, sir, being done, for example, using more Instagram and things like TikTok and through the youth service, sir. But obviously, that's not specific to what the deputy is referring to, and we can make sure we put that in place.
I think you're muted, sir.
I apologise. Deputy Lying.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister believe that he can deliver a population policy to the Assembly by the end of this year, even though the results of the census will not be known until November at the earliest? Thank you, sir.
Sir, as I think was alluded to in the scrutiny hearing last week, sir, by Deputy Hewlin, who has basic political responsibility for both population policy and population control policy, sir. The original intention was to have an interim policy in place before the election, sir, and obviously this Assembly chose to bring that forward to the end of this year. Whilst the scrutiny review shouldn't delay matters too much, obviously the debate on the population or migration control mechanisms has been deferred now till the first sitting in March. So, sir, I think essentially what the deputy was alluding to in that hearing, which I think is the basis for the question by Deputy Ayer, is was whether it was possible to bring a full and complete policy back to the Assembly for the end of the year, and he was essentially expressing the view that that could be difficult, particularly in the context of the timing of the census results. We also made the point, sir, is we've had the instruction of the Assembly and we will do our best to achieve what we can, making the very clear point, sir, that the migration control policy is important on this, because it then gives the levers to future politicians to turn on or turn off or control population in a far more effective way than we've had to date, sir. And that is why it's talking about laying the foundations for the migration control policy, sets the foundations then for being able to have an effective population policy going forward, sir.
Much. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. So given that the Chief Minister's new pick for Housing Minister and the Environment Minister both express support for a landlord licensing scheme today, and that the Minister abstained from the vote of P106, will the Minister now be promoting a landlord licensing law should it come back to the Assembly, both himself and amongst his Council of Ministers? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
Sir, one of the work streams that we know we've got to do includes things like, I know it's different, sir, I'm going to say the property register includes what the deputy just alluded to, and I will be sitting down with the new housing minister, sir, in due course to work out how the working responsibilities are going to be set up, and including the delegations for assistant ministers, and ensuring that that sort of work programme, sir, is given some clarity and some timing, sir. Thank you.
So supplementary.
Yes, indeed, Deputy.
So can the Chief Minister clarify that there was a difference between a register of landlords and licensing, and will he commit to the development of licensing sooner rather than later, given that we have the regulations ready to go and we have the laws in terms of minimum standards of housing? Thank you, sir.
As I said, sir, I will be sitting down with the new housing minister to work out the timing of all the various priorities that no doubt he will have, and taking account of the items that the deputies referred to, the work of the Housing Policy Development Board, and of course any other matters that come through that are relevant. Thank you.
Senator Messick.
Thank you, sir. A written question has revealed that whilst the Chief Minister has been in office, he's had more than 50 scheduled meetings with business groups, but has had just 3 with faith groups and 2 with trade unions. Does the Minister not accept the value that these groups could be bringing in sharing their experiences with decision makers and transmitting the views of the many people that they represent to those at the top of government?
Sir, just I think it's about not necessarily always the quantity of the engagement that we have, sir, but sometimes the quality of the engagement. And yes, sir, the point he makes is relevant. I would make the point, sir, that with the whole of the pandemic of last year and obviously continuing, that obviously does skew the work that we do at present, sir, and how we've been interacting, sir, with all parts of the society.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes, Senator.
Of course, it's going to skew what work you're doing, but surely part of that skew would be towards some of the most vulnerable people in Jersey who've been affected worse by this crisis, and it will in many instances be those faith groups and trade union representatives who will have seen these people on the shop floor face to face and understand what their needs are. So will the Chief Minister commit to doing what the Assembly unanimously agreed in an amendment to the CSP and hold proper engagement sessions with these faith groups, with trade union groups as well, so that their perspectives can be included in government thinking, so that he's governing in the inclusive way that he promised members he would?
So just because, sorry, so my camera doesn't be working there. Just because I haven't necessarily met personally, other than what we talked about, sir, it doesn't mean that meetings haven't been taking place with government. So, for example, sir, since the pandemic, using unions as an example, they have met, I believe, 137 meetings, sir, with government of representatives. So that doesn't mean there's no engagement, sir. From recollection, my understanding is that unions, and I do have to thank them, sir, for the way that there's been a lot of collaborative working in these areas. I've met, I think, weekly with generally officials, sir, and obviously, sir, with the things like the Connect Me and even such as the homeless policy, sir, there is a lot of engagement going on, particularly to address the vulnerable that the Deputy Senator, sorry, apologies, is referring to, and indeed, so we commented out on previous exchanges in questions about notice on the support that's been put in place, sir.
Deputy Truscott.
Yes, thank you, sir. Fort Regent has been identified as a potential regeneration project. Sir, could the Chief Minister advise when the much awaited report on the fort's future will be released?
Sir, there is a programme of announcements coming through over the next 2 to 3 months, sir, and the Deputy, I hope, will be delighted to know that Fort Regent is amongst those. And so, as well as various other briefings that are in the pipeline for members, there will be a briefing, several briefings, I suspect, on either directly Fort Regent or projects that relate to Fort Regent over the next, I will say, 2 to 3 months. I don't have the strict timeline in front of me, but in quite close time, sir, I hope members will be delighted with the plans that we will be announcing in due course, sir.
Supplementary, please.
Yes, Deputy.
Sir, in terms of millions, could the Chief Minister indicate how much will have to be spent on reviving the fort, bringing it up to modern standards? Thank you, sir.
So I can't give a total figure because it very much depends on one's timescale. There is funding, sir, in the government plan for some of the projects. There is also there are 1 or 2 bids, sir, that are in the fiscal stimulus bids, sir, for moving some projects forward. Those are all achievable numbers, sir, and are doable within our present financing framework. The Deputy is right, sir, though, in remembering that Fort Regent is a much loved asset of the island, hasn't been invested in for a long time, and to remedy that properly will be another investment that we have to do. But the short-term measures that we can put in place mostly are either budgeted, sir, or can appear from the fiscal stimulus side, sir. Thank you.
Connitab of St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. Being as we're saying the fort is a wonderful asset and, you know, great for the island, what is the Chief Minister wanting to do about the Opera House? The Jersey Opera House is going down into a dilapidated condition, which is very sad when the islanders have worked so hard to keep it as a theatre, and is well admired by a theatre. With everything that happened at the moment, we could have had an electrician go through it and some of the work could have been done. Could the Chief Minister tell me what plans he has for the Jersey Opera House, please?
Similar to Fort Regent, sir, actually, and the Conotab will not know this, but I did do, I don't know, in days gone by, at least 2 or 3 shows in backstage, and used to know my way around some of the ladders and back corridors of that part of the Opera House quite well. But so it also has a very soft spot in my heart, sir. And what I can say is that in terms of getting the electrician to go around and see what needed doing, that work has been done. I think that was alluded to in the press very recently. That was a work that was commissioned before Christmas, operationally, sir, from within the government. And my understanding in terms of funding is that the Opera House has completed an expression of interest for what's called the Fiscal Stimulus Fund, and that they've been invited to submit a business case. That means they are on to the next stage of assessment, and I believe that assessment then takes place over the next few weeks. And if provided that funding is granted, I make no commitments on that at this stage, but bear in mind what I've just said, then that would allow that work to go ahead, I understand. So
that brings the period of time allocated for questions to Chief Minister to an end, and that is the end of the last period of questions noticed. We now move on to public business. I remind members we adhere to the normal time limits that have become established. And the first matter is the draft Wildlife Jersey Law 2001, P110, lodged by the Minister for the Environment. The draft law had previously been adopted as to the principles, but were referred to scrutiny, and the debate therefore continues in second reading for considering of the individual articles. The main respondent will be the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. 2 amendments have been lodged, one by you, Minister, as to Article 1, and presumably we will take that as amended then, and to the first schedule, and similarly, and one by the Deputy of St Martin to Articles 8 and 34. Do you accept the Deputy of St Martin's amendments?
Sir, could I ask that Deputy Guida be the rapporteur for this item and deal with that question, sir? May I do that?
Yes, indeed. Deputy Guida.
Yes, sorry, no, I do not accept the amendment of Deputy Luce.
Well, then, how do you wish to take the articles, Deputy? Presumably 1 to 7 first, and then we'll come on to the amendment.
Absolutely, I will stop for Article 8, which is part of Deputy Luce's amendment, and I will stop for Article 35, which is also a part of his amendment, if you accept to split it.
Very well. Well, then we'll take Articles 1 to 7, Article 1 as amended by the Minister's own amendment. Yes. Do you wish to propose those articles then, Deputy?
Yes, sir. I would like to speak about the articles as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Yes, well, the first thing I'd like to do is to thank Scrutiny for the robust examination of this complex law. And I am sincere in this for giving us the time to alleviate the concerns of some of the stakeholders affected. We accept all of their recommendations, and we will continue the dialogue with the stakeholders where all the necessary guidance is written. I will now go through all the articles, trying to be as quick as I can. Part 1 of the law, in part 1 of the law, Article 1 defines terms and concepts used in the law as a whole. One important innovation throughout this law is the concept of deliberate action. Article 1.3 defines how deliberately is to be interpreted. This is a change from the more traditional legal form of intentionally, which was substituted to remain compatible with European law. It is an important but very subtle difference, which we have tried to make more explicit with a small change of wording in our second amendment. Article 2 sets out the general purpose of the law, which confers 2 general levels of protection, and Articles 3 and 4 define the protected wild animals, birds and plants, which are protected at the base level, while Article 5 provides higher levels of protection specific to certain wild animals, birds and plants. Part 2 creates a number of offences, describes defences, and introduces acts authorised by license. Article 7 provides that it is an offence deliberately to kill, injure, or take a protected wild animal, bird, or its eggs. It gives exceptions when authorized by a license or by the Animal Health Jersey Law 2016 or the Animal Welfare Jersey Law 2004. I would like to propose Article 1 to 7 as amended by our second amendment.
The Articles 1 to 7 seconded.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on Articles 1 to 7 or any of them?
Sir, if I may, the Connétable Greville will act as rapporteur for the panel on the second reading. Thank you, sir.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Connétable of Saint-Brelard, but does any member wish to speak on Articles 1 to 7 or any of them? If no members wish to speak, Connétable Greville.
Thank you, sir. I'm not quite sure, you might be able to advise me. Am I allowed to speak on each of the articles as they come up, or is this counted as one speech for all of the articles?
This is counted as one speech for Articles 1 to 7. Please, in this speech, if you have any comments on Articles 1 through to 7, as amended, please make any of those comments and observations, but you will have the opportunity to speak again when we move on to the other articles. So,
thank you, sir. I should just make it quite plain, I'm no longer actively involved in agriculture in any significant way, but people probably know that I do have a background in farming and I keep a close ear to the farming community. The principles of this law were adopted by the states at the end of last year, but at that time the EHI panel were aware of concerns that the farming community had regarding the effect of the law, the law would have on their day-to-day activities. And so the panel called in the law for further scrutiny. Up until the autumn of last year, the communication with the department to the farming and growing community on this subject had been poor. The restrictions imposed to combat the COVID virus did not help the situation. I'm convinced that the Assistant Minister, Deputy Guida, was not aware of the lack of communication until recently. But I know since the agricultural conference in the autumn, he became aware of the situation and he has been meeting representatives of the dairy and growing industries and he has been addressing their concerns. I know the industry is grateful for the time he has given to the subject over the last few months and they are looking forward to working with him to develop the practical guidelines that will be needed in order to make this law work. There were two main concerns that the farming community had. The first was the potential conflict between the legal requirements for farmers and landowners to cut their hedges in order to comply with the Brancage law and the obligation to protect wildlife under this new law. It has been accepted that the Brancage law would take precedence over the new wildlife law, and draft guidelines have been drawn up, I understand, giving farmers some indication of what is expected of them. The guidelines drawn up reflect the new approach taken by farmers 2 years ago after discussions with the Environment Department and environmentalists and indeed the Comité de Connétable. In essence, these guidelines require farmers to carry out the minimum of cutting of hedges while still complying with the Brancage law, which is so necessary to allow the free and, more importantly, safe movement of cars, cyclists, pedestrians and all road users. The second area of concern is the new wildlife law's impact on the day-to-day activities of farming. No guidelines have been set to cover these activities to date, that's my understanding. But I also understand that compliance with the law will be guaranteed if farmers are members of or follow the protocols of the LEAF organisation. LEAF, which is an acronym for Linking the Environment and Farming, is a body to which all farmers are obliged to join if they receive support from the states. LEAF is a body that sets out environmental best practice for farming and growing, and they carry out, LEAF does, they carry out independent audits on farms to ensure that farmers adhere. Sorry, sir, I'm getting a terrible some feedback, so apologies if I stutter a little bit.
I'll just see if it helps.
Thank you, sir. LEAF is a body that sets out environmental best practice for farming and growing, and they carry out independent audits on farms to ensure that farmers adhere to the requirements of LEAF standards. Farmers have been members of such bodies, for some of which were supermarket-led originally, for many years, and the farming community take their responsibility for taking care of the environment extremely seriously. One area which I didn't occupy too much of our panel's time, but one area that I'm a little concerned of and was drawn, somebody sent me an email only yesterday, is the control of non-native invasive species. There is provision in the law for the department to make funds available to control such species. One species that springs to mind is Japanese knotweed. It is thought that it was introduced into the island as a garden plant, and when people realised how persistent it was, they put garden cuttings of the plants on the nearest field hedge to get rid of them. This led to the establishment of the plant in field hedgerows. It seems unfair that the farming community should have to pick up the cost of trying to rid their land of this pest. I urge the Minister to make adequate funds available, particularly in the next few years, so that landowners do not have to pick up the cost of solving a problem that was not of their making. Funds have been made available in the past, but usually not adequate enough to follow the treatment through so the effective area can be permanently cleared. In summary, sir, the panel are fully in favour of this law and appreciate how important it is to update the 2000 law, and provided the Assistant Minister carries on his engagement with the agricultural community and continues to develop practical guidelines, and that they are put in place so that farmers can follow them easily. I therefore ask all members to support the articles of the law. Thank you, sir.
I think you're muted, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on Articles 1 to 7? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call on Deputy Guida to respond.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Constable of Grouville for his kind words. 2 years ago, when we started this this journey, it was already very, very clear to me that it would not happen with without the support of the farming community. And it is something that I revived a little bit a few months ago. This will not happen without the support of the farming community. And I pledge that we will work with them to make sure that they can work with this law. With that, I propose the articles.
Well, ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. Vote is on Articles 1 to 7. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting.
So I'm sorry, sir, I don't know if you've closed the vote, but I would vote for. I haven't. My system went down just now, and I have not been able to hear what happened in the last 30 seconds or so.
Well, that's one vote for. The Articles 1 to 7 have been adopted for 43 votes for, no vote contra, no abstention in the link, and an additional one indicated over the chat, I shall call it that. Very well, we come to now Article 8. Do you propose Article 8, Deputy Leader? There's an amendment.
Yes, sir.
Very well. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Deputy, I cut you across. I didn't know if you wanted to speak, given that we'll have to debate the amendment.
I will just quickly describe Article 8 so that we know what it is about. Article 8 creates offences of interference with dens and nests of protected wild animals and birds. There are some exceptions when the act in question occurs within the living area of a dwelling house. And with that, I would like to propose Article 8, please.
Very well. And Article 8 is seconded.
Sorry, is that the Article 8 seconded as proposed? Second,
yes,
sir.
So second is proposed, then we'll come on to consider the amendment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Seconded.
Yes. Then there is an amendment, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 33, Article 8. For Article 8.3, prohibitions relating to dens and nests, etc., substitute 3. The prohibitions in paragraphs 1 and 2 do not apply, except in relation to a bat of a species listed in Part 1 of Schedule 3, to anything done within A, the living area of a dwelling house, B, the footprint of any domestic premises attached to a dwelling house, or C, an area inside the curtilage of a dwelling house and extending to no further than 10 metres from the exterior of the house.
Deputy Sir Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I won't keep members long. So I just want to start at the outset and say that I am a great fan of this law. It's long overdue. We have a wonderful island and we need to protect it and its animals and biodiversity as much as we possibly can. In my 3.5 years as Minister, which came to an end 2 years ago, as the Assistant Minister has said, this law was in draft and I asked a number of times to see it, but it was never quite ready in a good enough draft for me to look at. So consequently, I didn't have time to look over it. But it's clear, sir, to me that this law has been put together by the senior officers in the Environment Department and reviewed greatly by other environmentalists. And I'm very keen, sir, to make sure that we always have compromises. We all have to live on this island, whether we're wild animals, domesticated animals, human beings. And we need to be sure that we sometimes just don't go too far. And I'm keen to strike a balance, and I'm keen to make sure that the humans on Jersey can enjoy the island as much as all the wild animals can. And that is the reason I brought this amendment. Members will know that this new wildlife law applies protections that don't apply within the living area of a dwelling house. And that means to me, sir, everything that is outside of a dwelling house. And this is where I have some concerns, and I think we need to find a small compromise, and it is small. This outside area, outside of your dwelling house, could be your porch and your car parking area. It could be a pathway, it could be an access to your property. And I want to remind members, and I'm just going to read from the draft law, that under the protection of dens and nests, it's now against the law. Dens and nests may be in use even if they are temporarily unoccupied. So a nest or an area doesn't even need to have an animal in it to be protected. And that animals, wild birds and animals are not allowed to be disturbed, whether they're in the vicinity of a nest or a den or not. And this is quite, to me, so quite relevant. And what I'm asking here is that we have a very small amount of area around dwelling houses where people live, where the humans can have a little bit of protection to enjoy and access their property. And just allow them a bit more freedom and a bit more latitude within the law to enjoy their access to their homes and to protect them in areas that are close to where they live. So that's as far as I go, sir, at this point. This just makes a small area around people's properties not liable for infraction with under this wildlife law. I'm not saying for 1 minute that people will use it, and there will be many instances where the public will actually encourage wildlife. But it may just be that you could find a nest or a wild animal on an access that will stop you getting to your house, stop you parking your car, stop you parking your bike, stop you getting into your garden. And I just want to make it a little bit easier for humans, given that this law is very predominantly in favour of wildlife and biodiversity. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Well, does any member wish to speak on the amendment? No member wishes to speak on the amendment?
Yes, please.
Gita?
Yes. I am afraid this amendment, unfortunately, goes a little bit too far. I sympathize with the idea in general, and it is probably something that we should work together to write guidance about. But as it is actually quite dangerous. The key is that there is no such thing today as a difference between human habitat and wildlife habitat. It's the same. We live in the same place. We share. Sorry, reading things from the computer. We share the same space, and of course, in a fairly urban area like Jersey, it is even more the case. But it is true of the entire world. We've just had a report from the UK where the introduction mentioned some extraordinary statistics. 95% of the mammals on the planet are humans and their livestock. Wild animals, wild mammals, so the animals that we protect in this law, represent 5% of the animals on the planet, of the mammals on the planet. For the birds, it's 70% of all birds are poultry. They are our animals. So when we mention wild birds and wild mammals, we're actually not talking about a very large part of what remains of the planet. And certainly, again, in a mostly urban area like Jersey, if we start denying them what we would consider our space, there is nothing left. I'd like to talk about hirundines. Where would swallows go if you didn't allow them to nest below our roofs? What about house martins? What about house sparrows? They're called house. They need the houses to live in. Lizards use our walls. Crapo use our ponds. If we start extending or denying protection in our environment, wildlife will not have an environment. So we can look at guidance for extreme cases. You know, if and again in Jersey, I cannot even think about one, because you could have a badger set up on your door in the UK, but it's not something that's likely to happen in Jersey. And if puffins decide to nest, under your wall, are you really going to try to move them around? So again, it's something that we can probably work together on using guidance, but it is not something that we can accept. And something quite important, this law is not for humans. I apologize in advance, but this law is for wildlife. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Taddy, you have a question for the Attorney General?
Yes, so if I can phrase my concerns and my thoughts first, and then see if it's something that the Attorney General can answer, sir. Otherwise, it would just be part of my speech at this point. So I got some. I know where the Deputy of St Martin is coming from on this issue. Partly because I've recently dealt with a constituent who had an issue with bats living in her roof, and I think it was resolved in the end by essentially her working with the Environment Department, but it wasn't a very satisfactory process. It was long and drawn out, and ultimately I think she was being asked to do things by the department which they had no legal basis to do. I say those comments without prejudice, but that's certainly I've got some evidence for that. And so as I said, there was a need for it to be done by consensus. My concern here is that we all want to protect wildlife, but it's important that the law is actually usable, sir, and that people don't find themselves pushed into unintended consequences and actions. So it might well be, for example, if we put a law in place that is too strict and doesn't have any flexibility in it, people might simply choose to ignore the law and to break it, and whilst they'd be committing an offence, of course that would rely on them being caught. Whereas if there was a different approach taken, which was maybe perhaps more sensible, then it might encourage people to contact the department because they know that they would get a more sensible response simply than one saying, no, the law says you're not allowed to touch this. And the example I would give, and the question I have in my mind, let's imagine you have...
If I interrupt you for a second, I appreciate you may have had to press such a question, but I'm taking this to be your speech. When you ask a question of the Attorney General and he answers it, I'll ask if you wish to continue your speech.
That's fine, sir.
So you have made a speech so far. Very well.
Yeah, sorry, so I thought I'd intertwine the two, and I don't want to make a second speech. So if I ask a question to the Attorney General, I may wish to continue depending on what he says, but it's more so out of courtesy to give him prior notice that I would be asking a question. And so I think I'm coming to that. So if I understand correctly, there's a difference between the domestic dwelling house, which will be covered in the law. But if somebody has, for example, a shed or an outbuilding, which it's then discovered that there is some type of wildlife that lives in there, but it's wildlife that is not wanted by the owner of the premises, and also if they find themselves in there and they've moved in since the property was acquired, and that, for example, the only reason that the wild animal is living in that place is because it had fallen into disrepair. For example, a hole had appeared in the roof or the wall, which under normal circumstances, if there were no wildlife living in it, the owner would normally wish to repair as soon as possible to keep that part of their property wind and watertight, because that's what one does as a good owner. And remember that this could also apply to a landlord who's tenanting out a premises for rental, who would at the same time have an obligation under his tenancy and potentially the residential tenancy law to keep his property wind and watertight, and certainly there would be an ethical responsibility on him or her to do that for the enjoyment of his or her tenants. But at the same time, there might be a conflict because this new law would say, well, actually, you can't repair that roof now, and you'd speak to the department and they say, no, you can't do that because there are now bats, or there's now frogs or toads or whatever is now living in your shed, and the shed which you might store your grain in, whatever, and it might actually prevent the purpose of that shed being used just because a hole has inadvertently appeared in it, and under normal circumstances you can't repair it, and you may not even be able to repair it even if that bird or bat species migrates for the winter, because the Environment Department will say, well, they're going to come back, or they'll say they might come back, you know, this is their home now. So you get, I'm asking the Attorney General, could we find ourselves in a situation without this amendment whereby an owner could find that they could never repair such a building, an outhouse, a shed, because the law would prevent them from doing so? Because if they were to repair it, they'd be contravening and destroying that habitat of the creature. And if that is the case, where does the law lie in terms of the proportionality and the enjoyment of one's property vis-a-vis trying to protect wildlife, which I think we all want to do, sir. So that's my question, sir. And I'm going to try and plug back in whilst the Attorney General was answering that, because I'm running out of battery.
Right. Well, Mr. Attorney, are you able to answer that question?
Sorry, wasn't listening to all of the debate which preceded the deputy's question, but I do note that Article 8 includes a provision that the person does not commit an offence if the person acts under in accordance with a licence. So the safest course for a person in the circumstances that are outlined by Deputy Tadier would really to seek assistance from someone who does have a licence. In relation to the various situations that he suggested, I have to say it wasn't entirely clear to me whether we were dealing with an actual dwelling house, as referred to in the article, or some sort of outhouse. It seems to me that the law is applying to someone's dwelling house that they actually live in rather than an outhouse. So I think that's probably as far as I can take it at the moment. But I'm happy to answer any further questions that may arise in relation to what I have said.
Thank you, sir. That's helpful to a certain extent, but I think the reason I was mentioning outhouses is because the way I read it is that the Deputy of St Martin's is keen that it doesn't just impact on the immediate dwelling house, but that the domestic curtilage, which could include those kind of areas which still need maintenance. I'm just seeking clarification about the proportionality of the balance between wishing to preserve nature's habitat on one side versus those areas and being able to have good maintenance of those areas. And I hear what the Attorney General said about requiring a licence, but it still is dependent on the department issuing a licence before being able to proceed, which there's no guarantee they would do. In my experience, they may well say, no, I'm afraid we can't give you a licence because our job as environment is to protect wildlife, and that's what the law is there for, so you can't have a licence. So insofar as it impacts on the amendment that we have in front of us, I think that's where my question is coming from.
So, Deputy, that concludes your speech.
So that's just my question, really. That's reiterating my question.
Well, Mr. Attorney, are you able to assist any further?
I'm not sure that I can. I had thought that the Minister's concern with the amendment was that if it was adopted, we wouldn't be in compliance with the relevant international standards. So that is the basis of his objection. In terms of, well, look, is this going to create some sort of problem for the future for owners of dwelling houses who can't repair their houses if they've got bats in them? Then I think I'd simply have to revert to my previous answer that really, if there is to be any work carried out, it would seem the safest course to a homeowner in those circumstances, or a home occupier, that they get assistance from someone who does have a licence. It may be that the Minister can help, or the Assistant Minister can help, as clarify whether guidance will that is to be issued will deal with this sort of particular point. But I think I'm not able to. I don't think I'm able to amplify on my previous answers to the Deputy's question beyond what I've already said.
Very much. And Deputy Teddy, have you finished your speech?
So can I thank the Attorney General for those answers, and I'll conclude there, just to add that I Deputy, when he sums up as to whether if that speech was germane, and whether how he feels about the purpose of his amendment to address those kind of issues. But that's my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Deputy St Martin for bringing the amendment. It's definitely an interesting one, which does get to, I think, kind of the heart of a very important matter for this island, and that is sharing 45 square miles of rock between 110 and counting thousand people, and the wildlife which ordinarily would live here. And you know, we heard earlier today that 4, 7, 10,000 homes need to be built on this island, which will only happen in concrete and various other forms of synthetic materials in the main, meaning that there will be less and less room for wildlife in this island. And as we build those thousands and thousands of concrete structures, we don't just push out wildlife from their natural habitats, we also replace that with new habitats. And those habitats are part of our homes. We have to accept that. And the law itself, as presented by the Assistant Minister, clearly states already that the living areas of homes are exempted, but it doesn't exempt areas like garages, sheds, outbuildings, etc. that may be outside. And I personally think that's absolutely correct, because those areas, garages, sheds, people's gardens, become the new habitat for the wildlife that we are displacing through this constant concreting of this island. In fact, it was Deputy Guida in his initial response to Deputy St Martin's amendment mentioned house martins, and that brought to mind someone who lived next door to one of my relatives who had a garage, or had a garage, which was actually detached from the property on a slightly separate piece of land, which was home to, or which housed a number of house martin nests. And one day, just because he didn't like the nests, that person went in and just destroyed and removed all of those nests. Personally, I find that an egregious example of destruction of wildlife habitat, and I was incredibly saddened to see that happen. If he's worried about dirt on his car, then it's not very expensive to invest in a cover for the car. They're easily available at all garages. And so I do feel that as our population continues to grow in the absence of a population policy, and as we continue to build more and more homes on this island, many of which will have garages, many of which will have other outbuildings, we need to accept that those outbuildings, etc., become part of the new landscape which wildlife will seek to find homes in. And I believe it's upon us to let them do so, because if we do not do that, sir, if we do not let them do so, then the island's wildlife will continue to shrink and will continue to suffer at our hands. And so I won't be supporting this amendment, because I think the balance is already there in the original regulations as proposed. And I also just want to, and perhaps Deputy St Martin can respond to this if necessary. As I read the amendment, people have mentioned bats, and I think that's a slight red herring, because I believe the Deputy St Martin's amendment kind of excludes those certain species of protected bats, and so if it was to be passed, then they would still enjoy protection within those areas such as garages, etc. So in that sense, all talk of bats, I believe, is irrelevant to this conversation. It is other wildlife that is being discussed here. But for myself personally, if there's some house martins nesting in your garage, let them be. Let them enjoy it. Enjoy the fact that you have the privilege, or we as islanders have the privilege of living so close to wildlife. But as we build, we need to give that wildlife space to live. And our garages are one of those spaces that I'll be happy to share with wildlife. In fact, I'd be delighted to see nesting animals, etc. in my garage. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Truscott.
Yes, thank you, sir. I wasn't going to speak on this one, but I thought I could offer an example of how this amendment could affect things. I'm quite privileged, lucky. I live in a house that was built in 1950, and we're surrounded by a fairly large garden that's fully enclosed. But it is a nature reserve. We've got squirrels, we've got bats, we've got grass snakes, you name it. Crappos are everywhere. I was out the other night on a milder night, and I counted at least 30 crappos out looking for company, and it's marvellous. It really is. And I've got a pond that's within 10 metres of the house, so it would be affected by this amendment. But it's an absolute haven of wildlife. We've got newts in there. It's like Newt City. I mean, there's, you know, you can count them on 10 fingers quite easily. Loads of them. So it's just that with this amendment, there would be nothing effectively stopping me from filling in that pond and destroying that wonderful wild habitat. And I think that is fundamentally wrong. And I do believe that Regulation 8 does actually protect that pond from such a thing, and obviously I wouldn't do that. I'm very much into my environment and protecting it, so, as we all are. So I just have that concern, and that's why I don't think I'll be supporting the Deputy's amendment. But I know where he's coming from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Young? Oh, I beg your pardon. No, sorry. Connie Tarpison Brillard called first.
Thank you, sir. A couple of points really, and I think that with all due respect to Deputy Morell, my understanding from Article 3 of Article 8.3 is that it only applies to bats, so our house martins will not be affected by the Deputy's amendment. My point really is over the health issue, and information that has come to me indicates that there are concerns over the risks to the public with regard to the potential carrying of viruses by bats, and it seems to me, sir, that it's something that the Deputy's amendment actually covers off. Whilst buildings play a part in the activities of some animals, and I don't deny that should be the case, European directives and policies should not be assumed to support false provisions for wild animals in people's homes. Now, I know that the Deputy's spreading that into closed out buildings, but it seems to be a dangerous assumption to assume that bringing bats closer to people is a safe thing to do. There is evidence that suggests that they can carry various viruses and diseases. That evidence is disputed by others, but of course, as they're migratory species, we can not be sure that this will be the case forever. So I do feel this is a risk, and the Deputy's proposal amendment is a balancing act, which I think would be well worth supporting. Thank you, sir.
Going to Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to be able to support the Deputy's amendment, as I accept from what he says it's well-meaning, but unfortunately it has very major consequences if it's adopted. It's very infrequently that we get to update a law like a wildlife law. It is 20 years since the last law was passed, and it is really, really very important. The pressures on our environment that have increased hugely in that time, and we really do, as a civilized society, I think, need to embrace and put into place the legal framework which meets the international conventions that Jersey has for many, many years signed up to. And I think it is in the spirit of Jersey that we want to look after our wildlife. So I would ask that if this amendment is passed, it wouldn't be compliant, as the Attorney General says. But the second reason is, I think, a practical reason. I think, as I understand the Deputy's amendment, he seeks to extend the existing exemption, which at the moment applies in the living area of a dwelling house, to the footprint of any domestic premises attached, which is basically outbuildings. That must be garages, sheds, all sorts of things, annexes, and of course we know in Jersey's got a massive variety of such structures, and also an exemption then within 10 metres of the curtilage, and of course where do you draw that? And I think my concern about that is that many of the Deputy Morell was absolutely spot on. I really absolutely agree with every word he said. But it's also true that over time, those outbuildings get up for potential development and put into other uses, even into residences. And so that, I think, provides an opportunity for, my fear is, for developers who wish to clear any wildlife that they see when their properties are required from the site, so that they don't have to carry out assessments of the ecological value. And I've certainly experienced a very large number of complaints about that practice. And I think if we were to enshrine that in law, with amendments, I think that would undermine potentially the sort of what we're trying to do is to do better for our wildlife. Now, the law gives us hierarchy. It's a very structured law, and our Deputy Gita has absolutely worked on this tirelessly. And I think it's really, there's a good structure there. And I'm worried about developers. Now, I think the Deputy Morell's, the Attorney General's answer spoke about licenses. When one's looking at regulation, I think one needs to have a very good and clear basis in the law. But where if flexibility comes, if it's required, and the individual circumstances, is in how the law is administered. And we do have the opportunity to deal with licenses, because there will be exceptional situations. But we also will need to have guidelines and rules as this law goes into effect. But it's going to serve the island for a very long time, I suspect. And so I think that we should not go with the amendment, sir. And I think it's a bit of a shame that kind of bats have come in. We all know the emotion of bats, we're all going through a pandemic, and there's all this, lots of discussion about how the jump viruses can happen between animal species and human beings and so on. But why? Yeah, it's a real shame there. But there are lots of other animals. The law sets them out: toads, grass snakes, and all the birds and so on. I absolutely empathise with what Deputy Truscott said. It is just wonderful to share that. And so I think, yes, let's please not dilute this law down with this change, and let's rely, as a Deputy Gita I'm sure we'll deal with, is question how this law is worked in practice, so that when exceptional and difficult circumstances, I understand what Deputy Tadeo is saying there. One does hear a question of, some, if you like, an over bureaucratic approach, and I don't want to be party to that, and nor does Deputy Gita. I'm absolutely sure in what he spoke about, the way he's built the cooperation with the farming industry and so on. But sir, I think for those reasons, I really support Deputy Gieler very much. He's taken the lead in this, and I don't think we can go with the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson. Senator Ferguson.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You know, as the Minister for the Environment is saying, we're busy coping with a bat-generated pandemic. So where is the evidence supporting this amendment with regard to our local bat population? You know, if you want to change your wooden coffin to plastic ones, you know, we're actually, with this, we're tying people to constant future expenditure. You know, is that fair? You know, it's I don't know. I would like the Assistant Minister to comment on this, because I don't like you know, sort of dictation from the powers that be that condemns me to future expenditure, because, you know, you have to paint your sort of pelmets around the house quite very frequently, and if you live near the sea, you've got to paint them even more. So are we, you know, actually doing this in the interests of the population? I don't know. I'd like a comment on it, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, then I close the debate and call upon the Deputy of St Martin to respond.
Thank you, sir. And let me start by addressing Senator Ferguson, the Constable of St Ballard, and Deputy Morell about bats, because bats are not part of my amendment now. They are not in any way affected by the changes that I propose. I would comment, though, given the opportunity to talk about bats, that they do concern me as a owner of property who has spent a lot of money providing the equivalent of a Hilton hotel for bats, both inside and outside a recent refurbishment. I am extremely concerned that the power people who are not officers are not delegated any powers, but seem to wield great effect on applications to the planning department over bats. And that's something that needs to be looked into, but it's not for today, sir, and that's another time. So bats aren't part of this amendment. To the Minister, Deputy Young, I hear his words and I share much of his concern, but it's a little bit disappointing, sir, that he hasn't come back and tried to meet me halfway here or propose any compromise. And he talks about how the law being depending on how the law is administered, and I find that a very interesting thing to say. Is he saying on one hand that maybe it would be administered this way, on the other hand maybe it might not be administered so strongly on the other? And I hate subjectivity in these matters, which is why when the deputy, when the minister and when his assistant minister mention guidance, I get worried, because if you want to use guidance, well, let's see it. Why wasn't the guidance published with this draft law so we know exactly what these things mean? I don't like signing up till I've read the detail, and if the minister wants to use guidance, well, we should have seen it before he proposed this draft. Deputy Morell mentioned swallows and house martins, and I've got those animals living here in my property, sir, and I certainly don't intend to. In fact, I positively encourage them to stay. But the point I would make is that under this new law, there will now be an offence of deliberately disturbing wild birds, swallows and martins, whether they're in the vicinity of the nest or the den, or obviously if they're in the den. At the moment, dens and nests are protected. But this new law will make it an offence for me to walk into my garage and disturb a swallow or martin in such a way that it flies off. And I'm concerned about that. I take great enjoyment to helping these birds to nest on my property. But somebody who was particularly overbearing could come in and say, when I go into my garage to get maybe a spade or to work in the garden, and I disturb a bird, I will now be breaking the law. It will be an offence for me to do that. Deputy Tadier mentioned very briefly where you are and where you are not causing offence, an offence. And under my amendment extends the protection you get. The proposed law gives you protection inside your dwelling house. My amendment would extend that to other buildings attached to the dwelling house and take that protection out a distance away, so that members of the public would not be breaking the very many new laws, offences, or creating the very many new offences which are created in this law. And finally, I come to the first person who responded, the Assistant Minister, Deputy Guida, and again, he mentioned guidance, and does worry me that guidance yet to be written will be used to administer, and I worry about the subjectivity. Deputy Guida said we have to share the habitats, and everything on the island is shared these days, and I agree with him in many respects, and I could jokingly say I'm glad that I'm not having to share my habitat outside my house today under such temperatures. But I would just finish by saying this, if things are so bad, why do we need to change the current law in the way we're proposing? Our bat population is increasing dramatically. I know my amendments don't refer to bats, but in many cases we are doing much better than we did in the past. And so I ask members here to support my amendment, an amendment that's just brought to try to find a small compromise and give a little bit of protection to the humans in this law, which is very, very heavily written. Well, it is written for the benefit of the wildlife and biodiversity of the island, and I call for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Much. I ask the referee to place a link into the chat.
Sorry, sir, can I check that this is for the amendments that we're voting?
Yes, we're voting for the amendment, and then as amended or not, we'll continue to debate Article 8 thereafter. So the vote is on the amendment. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the referee to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated, 13 votes for, 32 votes contre, no abstentions.
Could we have 13, please, sir?
Yes.
The members who voted pour were as follows: Deputy of St Martin, Deputy of Greville, Constable of St John, Senator Pallett, Constable of St Brelard, Constable of St Juan, Constable of Greville, Senator Valois, Constable of St Peter, Constable of St Mary, Senator Ferguson, Deputy of St John, and Deputy Gardner.
You're muted, sir.
I do apologise. I should try and get the knack of that. We now return to the debate on Article 8. Does any other member wish to speak on Article 8? No member wishes to speak on Article 8. Then I close any debate and ask the Secretary to place a vote into the link.
I started typing before you'd finished speaking, sir.
I'm sorry, so it's down to the rule that it is that once I provide a reasonable time for people to indicate a desire to speak, and if they haven't indicated before I say I close the debate, but we've now got
I type very slowly, sir. But I'll throw in the towel.
Thank you very much indeed, and then ask the Secretary to place a vote into the link. Open the voting and ask members to vote. The vote is on Article 8. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the Secretary to close the voting. Article 8 has been adopted, 41 votes pour, 2 votes contre in the link, and a further vote pour in the chat. We propose Articles 9 to 34. Deputy Guida.
Yes, sir, I'd like to propose the following articles. I'll go very, very quickly through them. Basically, the rest of the articles offer different levels of protection to specific animals and birds, also their dens, nests, eggs and offspring. We also deal with trade in animals, import, export, and selling, keeping animals that are protected. There's also articles on the use of devices, substance and methods to kill, injure, or take wild animals. Again, we've been talking with the stakeholders about the use of these, and I think that we are in agreement. Part 3, I'll be very quick, does exactly the same, but for plants. And also we talk about the control of invasive non-native species, which is greatly enhanced in this law. And part 4, that's quite important. Sorry. Well, part 4 is about invasive non-native species control. Article 34, I'll just mention this one in particular. It requires the Minister for the Environment to designate and publish strategies for the conservation of biodiversity, including a list of important habitats and species. Articles 34.5 and 6 require a public body on which a duty to have regard to promoting conservation of biodiversity is imposed under Article 2, to publish a report on actions taken in pursuance of that duty on a 5-yearly basis. And this is quite important because it is the first time that we actually put this burden on the government to take care of the island's biodiversity. Now, Article 30, sorry, I'll stop at Article 44, sir, and propose Articles 9 to 34 together.
Articles 9 to 34 are proposed. Are they seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on Articles 9 to 34 or any one of them? No member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and ask the greffier to post a vote into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Articles 9 to 34 have been adopted, 42 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour in the chat. We come now to Article 35. Minister, do you propose Article 35? That's of course subject to a discussion on amendment. You propose Article 35?
Yes, sir. I'd like to put, Article 35 empowers the minister to make orders designated area of special protection and making further provision for protection within such areas of specified wild animals, wild birds or wild plants, including provisions restricting access and prohibiting particular acts or activities. Before making such an order, the minister must give notice in writing of the proposed designation to owners of and occupiers of land falling within the proposed area. Such notice must invite representations to the minister, and an order may not be made unless the owners have consented or have failed to raise objections within 28 days from the date of the notice. Again, there is also a right of appeal under Article 40. I would like to add, sir, that this is not a way to make stealth SSIs. This is the power for the minister to act extremely quickly to protect transient species or species that have established recently in the island. We've had an actual example very recently with the roseate terns nesting in the Equeus. Basically, it's a bird that we haven't seen very often in the island, and all of a sudden they decided to nest there. This article would have allowed the minister to protect them within a very, very short time. The residents of the island were consulted, were all in agreement, and were actually quite happy that we could raise the protection for these animals. But the law was postponed and we were not able to use it. We really hope that we will be able to use it for those purposes in the next year. And with that, I propose Article 35.
Article 35 seconded.
Yes, sir.
Very well. There's an amendment to Article 35, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 50, Article 35. In Article 35(6), designation of areas of special protection. For 28 days, substitute 3 months.
Thank you, sir, and I don't think this amendment will keep members very long. It's very straightforward. In the days when this draft law was lodged last year, I was still a backbencher and I wasn't sitting on the Environment Scrutiny Panel. And as I read through the draft law and the explanatory notes, I suddenly realised that something which had appeared quite satisfactory to me had been changed in the law itself. And as the members will see from my report, it was stated in the explanatory note that a 3-month period would be allowed for objections, which I thought was quite sensible and sort of a amount of time one would normally expect for something quite as serious as an area of special protection. But then I noted that when it actually came to the wording of the law itself, that period had been reduced to 28 days. And I found that quite surprising, sir, because 28 days is the amount of time people are allowed to object to a minor planning application. But I have to say to members that areas of special protection are not minor planning applications. And while I take the example that the Deputy Guida has used at the Equihose and saying the Minister needed to move quickly, it may well be, sir, that members of the public need a little bit more than 28 days for any particular reason, because this law will empower the Minister to restrict access and prohibit particular acts or activities, and that could be on, well, it will be on somebody's property. They may well object to that happening, and it would be my, I would say, that something as serious as the creation of an area of special protection, that members of the public should have more than 28 days to object. I would think that's perfectly normal. Somebody who was drafting this law obviously thought 3 months was the right period of time, because as I said at the outset, it was actually written in the explanatory notes that that period of time would be 3 months. I'm disappointed, obviously, that the Minister's come back and gone for the 28 days. I'm putting the case for 3 months, and I'll leave it there, sir, and see what members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Any member wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes, please, sir. I'm trying to type Councillor St Ballard, if I may, just
yes,
to.
St Ballard.
Thank you, sir. Just to speak in support of this amendment, which is a logical amendment. We all know of the experience that we've had over the past few months with regard to times and delays, and this just seems a very sensible route to go down. So I would urge members to support it. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to. Deputy Guida.
Yes, thank you, sir. Again, I'd like to reiterate the fact that these powers were created to be emergency powers. And if we waited for 3 months to protect roseate terns in the Equihose, they would have done with their offsprings, given that they were lucky enough to bring them to term. So we're really talking about something that things that need to be done very, very quickly. If a bald eagle, decided to nest somewhere in the island, we would probably be extremely happy to cordon the area and make sure that it raises its chicks properly. This is about emergency. The 28 days are the time that we allow people to voice objections. It doesn't mean that we can do it without the approval of the owners of the land. Thank you, sir.
Very much. So, any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon the Deputy of St Martin to respond.
That noise wasn't for me, sir, but I'll happily continue. I just, as I said to members, I won't drag this one out. I thank the Constable of St Ballards for his support. He, like me, thinks that 3 months is a better period of time. This is purely a decision for states members to decide whether they think 3 months is better than 8 weeks. I would put forward the case, 28 days. And I would put forward the case that 28 days during a normal summer, when people might be away or for whatever reason, is quite a short period of time. It may not be noticed in the Gazette, or members of the public may not realise what's going on. And I much prefer the period of 3 months. So I leave it there, sir, and call for the appel. Thank you.
It's called for. I invite, I would ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask Greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated, 20 votes pour, 24 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and 1 vote each pour and contre in the. Very well, we return to debate on Article 35. Does any member wish to speak on Article 35 in its unamended form? If no member wishes to speak on Article 35, then I will ask the greffier to place a vote into the chat. Close the debate. I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, ask the greffier to close the voting. Article 35 has been adopted, 45 votes pour, 1 vote contre, no abstentions in the link, and 2 votes pour in the. Very well. Minister, do you now propose?
Sir, can we have the one contre first, please?
Yes, the one contre.
Yes, the vote contre is Senator Pallett.
Minister, do you now propose Articles 36 to 54 plus the schedules as amended by your own amendment, Deputy Leader?
Yes, please, sir.
Very well. Did you wish to speak to them, Deputy?
Very quickly, Part 5 deals with licensing of activities, which would otherwise be an offence under the law. And basically, Part 6 contains all the provisions for the operation of the law. The schedules, and that's quite it. One thing that is important about this law in general, and of course that we try to apply in any new law, is to make it a little bit more malleable. So this is much easier to modify, and in particular, all the lists, especially the list of protected animals, can be changed by orders. And that's quite important, that this is a law that depends a lot on its schedules, and that the schedules can be modified. So with that, I propose Articles 36 to 54 and the 13 schedules, sir.
Those articles in the schedule seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on those articles, any of them, or any of the schedules? If no member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the usual way. The members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask Secretary to close the voting. The remaining articles and schedules have been adopted. 45 votes for, no votes contra, no abstentions in the link, and 2 further votes for in the chat. Do you wish to propose the matter in third reading, Minister? Oh, Deputy Gidash.
Yes, please, sir. I would like to propose it in third reading.
Is it seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Conatapis and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. The updating of this law has been long overdue, and much work has been done by the department to address this. It's not unusual, sir, to find the devil in the detail, and it was these details which stimulated my panel to call the proposition in for some further consideration. It's clear, sir, that the Minister is shy on resource to apply to the policing of this new law and suggests that there will be an ongoing need for continued funding if what is being proposed is to work. Concern has also risen over the ability for members of the public to be able to identify protected wild animals and birds, in addition to the 78 protected plant species listed in Schedule 8 of the law. I'm fortunate, sir, in that I had a father and grandfather who were botanists, but notwithstanding that, it may be for the Education Department to include the subject in our school syllabus and ask that our new Education Minister please to take note. The Minister, sir, has worked with the panel to satisfy its concerns, and I'm grateful to him and his team for their cooperation, and particularly the scrutiny officers involved in producing our comments. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Conatapis. Does any other member wish to speak on in third reading? No other member wish. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I think I'd like to thank the scrutiny panel and the words of the Carnital. It is absolutely true that there is work to be done in the future, and the island we will have to address the issue of the resources and the effort we put. But this law, I believe, if members approve it today in third reading, which I sincerely hope they will be around for a long time. It lays a real strong framework which can help us look after our wildlife much better. And so I think, I've certainly, I want to particularly highlight the work of my assistant minister in bringing us to this point, because when he and I were both elected, he was very clear. This was very much an issue which he, as my assistant minister, wanted to concentrate on. With his background is very much in this area, and indeed as a farmer himself in a previous life. So I know he's put tremendous effort into this, and I believe that that will pay dividends in the work with the farming industry and others in future. And as in picking up members' comments, that's what I meant when I said is how important this is law being put into practice. I think that's the work to be done. I can remember when the previous law went through 20 years ago, and indeed I think this is equally an important day, and I do believe there are large numbers of members of our community in Jersey will we really see this very positive, that if we make this step today, which I sincerely hope we do so, and it brings us into line with fully compliant with international conventions. So, sir, with that, I'd like to support the third reading proposal, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Senator Ferguson.
Sir, I hate to sound like a complaining old Minnie, but I would like to ask that the department listen to the public if they complain to them. Some 6 years ago, I complained about Japanese knotweed And effectively, I was told not to be stupid because it was all female Japanese knotweed and wasn't any problem because it didn't proliferate. And now, you know, it's still proliferating. I'm glad to see they're actually talking about doing something. But please, if the public complain, listen to them. Sometimes they do know what they're talking about. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Guida to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to join my thanks to the Minister for the scrutiny panel and its chair. Yes, they've worked very well on our project, and their input was extremely helpful. I'd like to promise Senator Ferguson that after years of decline, the department is growing again, and that we hope to help the people as much as we can, as much as we will help the natural environment. Having said that, I would like to propose the law in third reading.
Well, I'll ask Greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the usual way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the Greffier to close the voting. The law has been adopted in third reading, 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour in the chat. The adjournment is proposed, and accordingly the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.